on this. I don't think this is right. The critics of the we can talk about it later.
Good evening.
I agree with you. Like, I'm just kind of like.
Welcome to the Midcoast Community Council meeting of December 10th, 2014. Will the council members please introduce themselves?
Chris Johnson.
Dan Haggerty.
Laura Stein.
Dave Olson.
Lisa Ketchum and Aaron Dicer and Joel Janot won't be able to attend this evening. The first item on our agenda is Nicholas Calderon giving us the Board of Supervisors report.
Still getting organized somehow, I apologize.
Take your time.
I forgot the name tag, and so I wanted to get that out. All right, so welcome everyone. It's nice to see everyone. It's been a while. First announcement, back on the table in the back, there are some surveys that the county is trying to conduct regarding the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve as an area of special biological significance. Did I get that one right? ASBS, and so if everyone would be willing to take a couple minutes out of your time just to fill that out, and then leave it in the back so I can take when I leave, that'd be greatly appreciated. It's very helpful for us as a county as we try to improve Fitzgerald Marine Reserve and protect it at the same time. Next announcement, some of you may know by now, Supervisor Horsley has hired a new aide. This is a fourth aide, so it will not be in replacement of one of his existing staff members. It's in addition to. Her name is Deborah Hurst. She actually lives out here. She lives in Moss Beach. She is a co-sider, and she's phenomenal. Some of you probably have worked with her in the past, but she's great, and so she's now on Supervisor Horsley's staff, and she will be working on the South Coast. So I will be. We've shifted some responsibilities. I will now be the sole Midcoast representative, so I will be doing all things Midcoast.
Princeton too?
Yep. Yeah, so anything that you guys need help with here on the Midcoast, in the past you probably have come to me, but now you can absolutely come to me for anything, as always. All calls and emails are welcomed. Next announcement, today we had a planning commission meeting. And on that planning commission meeting specifically were two items that I know people out here are interested in. One of them is an item regarding the Oceana Hotel, and there was a proposal to take the current white tent that they use for weddings and turn it into a permanent structure. The purpose of that project is to mitigate noise pollution. That has been a concern to some in the surrounding areas. So that was approved by the Planning Commission today, 5-0. And there were some questions as to some of the conditions of the permit. Some conditions were, carried over from the original permit for when it was a temporary structure. And so there was some need for clarification surrounding that. And so that was addressed. And so that project has been permitted. And like I said, that was approved 5-0. Additionally, the planning department gave a presentation to the planning commission regarding Connect the Coastside, which is the comprehensive transportation management plan out here. And so planning commission was very happy to see what was going on with that. They had some great comments, really interested in seeing what can we do around transit, what can we do around trails, and they're interested to see what the county brings back to them next time. And so they're going to provide some great comments on that. And most of the public, actually both public speakers for the most part, were concerned as to how Connect the Coastside is going to blend with Half Moon Bay's general plan update. So as far as what the plan said, as far as what Connect the Coastside said for the Midcoast, people were very happy with the direction that we were going. Happy to say that Caltrans has conducted the speed survey out here. I don't know if, Mr. Kehoe, I do see you back here. You didn't know? You didn't know about it?
You're supposed to bring the donuts.
I know. I was waiting for the phone call.
We weren't given pre-warning, so we could skew the data.
Well.
Oh, that didn't go out of camera.
No, I think you're good. So the speed survey was conducted, and we're hoping to get the results of that in January. So when we find out, we will let you guys know, and fingers crossed that it will support us in our efforts to get some new congestion management features for Highway 1 here on the Midcoast. So we are optimistic about that. Last week, we had a conference call with Caltrans and the Coastal Commission regarding Surfers Beach. Chris was on that call. Neil was also on that call. And during that call, we had some conversations regarding the project alternative. Which project would the commission like to see in an application to them for a coastal development permit? They said that the applicant, meaning County and Caltrans, would have to select that. At the, actually I think it was the last MCC meeting I was at, we discussed that project and we had our consultant out here, and the message we received from the community is that RIPRAP or RSP was actually the preferred option at that location, all things considered. And so we, the county, are pushing for that to be the preferred alternative. So we will be pushing Caltrans in that direction. We haven't had any subsequent conversations with them regarding that, but we will keep everyone posted. But the county heard at that time that the community, all things considered, would like to see RSP at that location, and so that is what we will be carrying forward. And we'll keep you guys posted. I don't know if Chris is going to want to provide an update on his take of that conference call. It had its ups, it had its downs. It was frustrating at some points, but I was happy to, I was happy that Chris and Neil were on that call so they could really get a sense as to the, what's happening on these calls and the struggles that this project's going through. We'll see what happens after this this storm that's coming through, if anything changes or not. But we were happy at the end of that call, and that project's progressing. So we're working very hard, and we're doing everything we can to protect that highway for everyone out here. Last thing is the fence at 7th Street. I know this has been a long standing issue, and so I just want to provide a brief update on that. That was supposed to go to the Planning Commission today. It was bumped off of the agenda due to larger projects. So there are 2 projects going on in the county right now. One everyone is familiar with, which is Big Wave, and the other is a project called Ascension Heights, which is a housing development project on the Bay side in Emerald Hills. I'm sorry, in the Highlands. And so as those 2 projects progress and they get bumped from one Planning Commission agenda to another, they either have to be continued or something changes and therefore they can't meet that Planning Commission agenda date that they're originally scheduled for, they get first priority given the size of this project. And so it was bumped. 7th Street fence has been bumped in the past, and it just continues to happen that way. So we are hopeful that January is going to be the month that we will be able to. We are hopeful that January is the month that we'll be able to bring that to the Planning Commission and get a CDP for the removal of the fence and the installation of bollards there. So the plan is to do bollards and not a guardrail for safety. Yes, my friend.
Why can't it go to the zoning hearing officer?
Any CDP, any project that is done by, my understanding is any public works project has to go to Planning Commission for a coastal development permit.
I know they have to get a CDP, but I don't understand why the zoning hearing officer couldn't approve it.
Like I said, my understanding is it's got to go to the commission.
Just for perspective, all 5 of those warehouse buildings on either side of Romeo, on Princeton Shoreline, all 5 of those were approved in one day by the zoning hearing officer, and we live in it forever after.
I understand, but there weren't public work projects, right? We're held to a specific standard, and so we have to follow those.
All right, so you say bollards, okay, so we had on our agenda last April that the county was coming out and they were going to tell us what the plan was for 7th Street, and they didn't show up. Yes, it was April 23rd, I believe. They didn't show up, and so Has there been any more thought to, other than just saying, oh, by the way, it's not a guardrail, it's bollards? I mean, did they have a plan that we could look at while we're waiting month after month for this to,
And who made the plan?
They would
That
have
would
been
be
developed by
DPW.
Public Works.
DPW?
The other thing is, Big Wave is the first planning commission meeting in January, and then we've got Ascension Heights, so I don't see this happening by February at the earliest. This is why I asked why it couldn't be the zoning hearing officer.
And I'll ask, but like I said, the way it's been explained to me is Public Works projects have to go to PC, Planning Commission, but let me ask about that and try to get you guys an answer.
Hopefully, it's a very non-controversial thing, so they might be
Yeah,
able to
that's what
slide
this-
it in ahead.
Yeah.
The fence at the end of Seacliff had to get something comparable, and it was like nothing. It was
I
like
know,
nothing.
I know. I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of DPW for that one. I will work to get you guys answers as to if we can go to ZHO or not. And I will try to get you guys the designs. I had not realized it's been since April, but I will, it's been a while.
Well, and it's been over a year since Supervisor Horsley kindly said, yes, he would get this done, but he needed a little time, but, you know, it has been now over a year since that
Well,
agreement.
in government speak, a year is pretty
Oh, no,
quick.
no, because all told, this has been over 2 years
Right, but
since
it's
we
only been
brought
a year
this
since.
forward.
Right. But it's only been a year since he said yes, so, I mean, like I said, a year is light speed.
That was a tough year to come around to that, and we thought, oh, now finally we've got this, okay.
But I agree with you, I was also in the same boat as this is gonna happen, and the rug was pulled out from under me as well. And so, all I can do is apologize. The fence was
Yeah,
pulled over me on that one.
the other thing, so, you know, you talk about DPW and their projects and things. At Pillar Ridge, we replaced a culvert under the driveway, under the parking lot, it was maybe 300 feet long.
Mhm.
Got a CDX for that.
That was probably maintenance for an existing utility, maybe. There are all these little clauses, plus that's,
Okay,
if the
I'm
county,
just-
did the county do that project?
No, it was
Well, see,
private,
that's a-
they
that's a
went in and
private
got the
project, not a
permit.
public
No,
works
it's
project.
much more extensive than, okay, I guess,
You should
you know,
still see why this can't be done on CDX.
this,
I'll ask, I mean,
Okay.
that's the best I can do.
at this point, just something more solid than, you know, like I say, oh, well, they're coming to tell you what it's gonna be. Well, they're not coming. Well, it's gonna be here, it's gonna be here, it's gonna be here. And so it's like, at this point, you know, some kind of a different answer, other than, oh, it's been postponed. So-
We'll do our best. I mean, I've been riding this roller coaster with you guys as well, so. And every up and down, and turns and
All right.
loops, so.
Thank you.
I will do my best to get you guys the answer for the designs and the CDX and the exact date as to when this will be going to the planning commission.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Was that those all, please, it's not public comment now. When it's public comment, then you can, whatever. Okay, so is that done with your report?
I have-
Yeah.
Lisa, I have a question. Can I ask him a question
Yeah.
about that? Sorry, Nicholas, I thought I looked at the agenda closely, but you said this 7th Street fence got bumped off the PC meeting today for Big Wave?
No, it's
No.
next week.
Big
It
Wave
got
is
bumped.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why
Yeah.
is Big Wave?
It
Why-
just-
what happened?
No, it just keeps getting, it was supposed to be on a prior date, it keeps getting bumped.
Basically, it got bumped from next Wednesday, and there's a house on that agenda next Wednesday that's gonna be continued, so that left some space, but too late now because the agenda is very frustrating. Any other questions for Nicholas?
Yes, I do. Nicholas, you said that the COSIDE is called the preferred method, preferred armoring riprap. Did I miss a meeting? Because I know that the last time we spoke here, that there was gonna be further community outreach in regards to that.
So I
Did I
don't think
miss?
you've missed a meeting. I think we were all at the same one. And the takeaway was that is a majority of people in attendance were in support of the RSP option, given the impact that a sheet pile wall would have immediately down shore of the project area, as well as The RSP would be more aesthetically pleasing compared to the sheet pile wall. As far as additional outreach, we will be doing more engagement with the community, but we need to know which project, which alternative is moving forward to the 30% design, and that needs to be selected now. Unfortunately, this project is nothing like any other project that the county works on where we have a lot of time. As we all know, we don't have a lot of time at this location. We can't take months to discuss and debate design alternatives. We have months to get our permit application submitted and approved. One of the things we discussed, the Coastal Commission asked us is can you get us the application and come to the Planning Commission in March? That's in 4 months. You know, this project, everyone's gonna have to be flexible with this, and we're doing our best to engage with the community and talk with the community. But, you know, this is unlike anything else, and I have a feeling that come Friday morning, when everyone wakes up, you know, we may be looking at a very different situation at Surfers Beach. So the thought of having extra time, you know, our time might actually be getting shorter instead of longer there. Not to say that we're trying to negate or circumvent the public process, because we're not trying to do that. But everyone's gonna have to move at a pace. You know, we talked about a year being fast. Well, this project's moving fast.
And just, I'm sorry, I haven't been able to follow the whole thing, but the reason it's been delayed, this whole thing, is because of jurisdictional complications that the band just couldn't get together to talk about it. That's why we're down at the 11th hour emergency situation.
I would disagree. I would say the reason we're in this situation we're in is because the current situation doesn't warrant a declaration of emergency. And so therefore, Caltrans nor the Coastal Commission could declare an emergency and go in and do an emergency project. And therefore, the county took it upon ourselves, even though we technically own no land inside this project area. It's not our land, but you guys are our constituents. We took it upon ourselves to lead this project and to make sure that this project gets done. And so Supervisor Horsley's been leading it for over 8 months now. If Supervisor Horsley didn't step up and say this project needs to be done because waiting for something to happen on that highway before something is done is unacceptable, if he had not said that, then we would not be having this conversation. In fact, the conversation we would probably be having is Caltrans gonna declare an emergency if something happens to this embankment over this next storm? And my answer would be, I don't know. But because Supervisor Horsley is leading this charge, we're having a very productive and important conversation right now. So I wouldn't say it's that the band couldn't get together. I would say that it was not high on enough people's priority list until Supervisor Horsley made it #1 on a lot of people's priority lists.
Okay, last question, have you been able to make a field trip up to Pacifica at the Land's End beach access, all that work?
I have not.
You have not?
I have
Okay.
not.
All right,
I don't know if our consultants have, and I can talk to them, but I personally have not.
okay. Yeah,
But I
asked the
will try
consultants.
to get up there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Nicholas? All right, I'd like to open public comment. I'd like to open public comment. You want to put in a speaker slip?
I would like to ask Nicholas to report
You
on the
can-
2 projects. This is part of Nicholas's report.
What project, I'm sorry?
Congestion
Come up.
management project and the comprehensive transportation.
I don't have an update.
So they went to the,
We
Oh,
can't-
I already covered that.
Nicholas, Len, if you'd like to speak, please come to the microphone so that people can, all right.
So, if you don't, I'll hold you on this one. Here we go. Planning Commission, connect the coast side.
I have something on that I was going to announce during.
Oh, well, I'm gonna let Lisa do it then. And there hasn't been any update on congestion management. January is when we anticipate to see the next series of designs. We'll put those on MindMixer, and then we will do another round of community engagement in January. We didn't think it would be appropriate to rush to try to do something in December, given that people are traveling, kids are getting out of school. Public meetings at nighttime is gonna be probably pretty low on people's priority list when it comes to the middle of December. And so we have opted to push everything back to January.
And when you say congestion management, you're talking about crossings, left turns, and medians, right?
That is correct.
We relate to that term better, okay. Let me just, okay, so we're moving on now to public comment. I was gonna make an announcement.
You have to allow comment on every item on the agenda. This is an agenda item. You can't say, no, you can't speak to this, because there it is on your agenda.
I'm going to answer the question about the Comprehensive Transportation Management Plan. The next phase is development and evaluation of alternatives. There will be a TAC meeting, Technical Advisory Committee meeting, January 7, and a community meeting at Brews and Views with Supervisor Horsley on January 8. Then there will be a second public workshop in late winter. You can keep track of this project at their website, connectthecoside.com. Does anybody want to speak at public comment?
I have a question.
I'm gonna
Well,
speak to
hold
the
on, just one,
supervisors.
All right, you can, all right.
1 second, I have a question. So you're saying January 7th is going to be the tactical committee?
Yes.
Okay.
And what was on the 8th?
The 8th is Brews and Views at the brewery with Don Horsley will be there.
Can you email me those notes? Or are they digital form?
You've retired from being secretary.
Well, nobody told me that. What am I doing here then?
Well, that's okay.
I
That's
figured until
okay.
the official baton has been
That's
passed,
great. That's great, thank you.
I would love to be not doing it.
Leonard, would you like to come up to the podium and ask all your questions?
Let me remind you, I've never lost a Brown Act argument, so don't argue Brown Act with me, all right? The Sam Wet Weather Overflow Project in Montera that was done roughly a decade ago, I don't remember the exact year, where we repurposed the old mothballed Montera treatment facility, a roughly 500,000 gallon concrete tank. It was done, Dave Dixon, the SAM plant manager of the time, got a CDX for that. $1 million project to excavate 500,000 gallons of dirt from a mothballed facility and rebuild it and repurpose it was done on a CDX. So I can't imagine that replacing a fence with a remodeled fence called bollards can't be done on a CDX. And clearly that project was a public works project, the SAM project was a public works project. You have to ask. If you don't ask, the answer isn't going to be yes. I think you can get a CDX for it.
Situations are all different. I will talk to planning. I am not planning. I'm not our planning director. The best I can do is ask.
Anybody else in public comment? Len?
Lynn Erickson from El Granada. One is really a question for Nicholas on your report. When they had the last meeting for the Comprehensive Transportation Management at Brews and Views, it proved a really inadequate facility. There was not enough space, there was extra noise. It was pointed out there were other better facilities like the Cypress Center.
Mhm.
So were those investigated and why weren't those used for this meeting?
So there was the reason we used the Havana Brew Company is because we felt that that room would have been adequate size. Clearly that was clearly that we were off. There were more people participated than we anticipated. As far as Cypress Meadows, I believe we're going to try to use that for future meetings, and we fully understand that the last meeting was not in the best environment, and so we're going to try to do everything we can going forward to avoid a situation like that, and we think Cypress Meadows will probably be a really good location going forward. I know one of the things we wanted to do was try to hold it at a central location where people from both Half Moon Bay and the Midcoast would be encouraged to attend. But I think Cypress Meadows would probably be a really good
So
option.
but you had just said it was going to be Brews and Views, which is not.
That's
by-
a different meeting.
Brews and Views is
That's a
very
different
different.
meeting.
Brews and
What?
Views is very different than a community workshop like the one we had, right? Brews and Views is more of a.
What, the last one was a Brews and Views type meeting, was that just at the brewery,
No,
is what you're saying?
well, no.
It
so
was in
the-
that same space,
It was in the
but it
same
wasn't a
space,
Brews and
but
Views.
it's, have you been to Brews and Views?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so Brews and Views is dialogue, right? So there's someone who hosts it, and they ask a person a question, and that person answers questions.
I've been there.
Right? There, we had a workshop, we had a PowerPoint presentation, people were able to get up and put notes on maps, very different formatting, right? So, the next meeting that we hold, the next workshop that we hold, will probably be a very similar format as the last one, where there will be a presentation, people will be able to ask questions, and then get up and comment on maps and make sure that, maybe we break into small groups, I don't know, we have Flint Strategies is leading the outreach, and Flint Strategies does a great job. We get compliments on how they've done Princeton, we get those compliments all the time, and I know they're trying to do their best to mirror that based on the amount of attendance and participation that we're getting. So, going forward, we're gonna work to have a more appropriate site and make
So,
sure that we don't have
Then-
the
then
disruptions that we
just a
had last time.
clarification, so what is happening at Brews and Views?
Brews and Views, Dawn will be there, and whoever's hosting Brews and Views will have a dialogue, a back and forth dialogue with Supervisor Horsley, and he will be answering any questions that.
So this is not specifically about the comprehensive transportation management?
The comprehensive transportation management plan will be the topic, but this isn't a workshop. This isn't an opportunity for people to provide public comment that we're gonna be writing down and putting on maps, and, we're not gonna have it set up like a workshop. This is very much an informational opportunity for people to hear Supervisor Horsley talk on maps.
There were two events I mentioned. One was Brews and Views, and the other is there would be a second public workshop in the late winter, no date yet.
So
That would be.
shame on me for missing your opening comments, but I wasn't here for that. That being said, I think if you look at what we're being presented with in the area of transportation, which you can count our crossings project, left turns, et cetera, the comprehensive transportation management plan. Tonight, we're going to hear about, it was called parking, but now it's called access. I mean, there you go. And I think, given those three, that they're all in some sense the child of the 2000 and whatever safety and mobility study, it would be more useful for Supervisor Horsley to speak to all of those and give some overall context, because if you read those one after the other, they all have similar introductions. They talk about this part over here and that part over there. So I think if Supervisor Horsley is going to be at an open discussion, it would be better to bring those under a single umbrella there and try to give the community a sense of all of those pieces rather than one, leaving many people not understanding how that related to crossings and other things.
So the Connect the Coast side, right? The document that's out right now is the build-out analysis and existing conditions report, and that addresses the need for parking. In fact, this access study has been incorporated. Part of this access study, a parking study, has been incorporated into that study itself. That study addresses the need for crossings and things like left turn pockets. So the congestion management study, the congestion management project, which you're referring to, is actually cited and discussed in this build-out analysis and existing conditions. So everything is coming together in that. But the purpose of the Brews and Views in January is specifically to discuss the congestion management, the comprehensive transportation management plan. The
And I understand that.
So if someone shows up and asks Supervisor Horsley about the crossings or the trails, he'll be happy to answer that. But the purpose of Brews and Views is specifically to discuss Connect the Coast side, and we're not, I don't think we're interested in opening it up to any transportation issues that anyone has on the coast side. It's, we're trying to focus it specifically on Connect the Coast side because we want to educate people on that.
Well, just your answer sort of makes my point, that to answer any of those or take any question which might come up, those things are incorporated there. So, he might not want to call it that, but that's all would be on the table and questions that would come up. So,
Right.
Anyway, that's my point.
Right, well,
Done with that.
And that's what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is if you go and say, Dawn, I want to talk to you about the congestion management project, you're going to confuse people who are there. And in fact, instead of educating people, people are going to walk away more confused than what they would be before, which would be counterproductive to the
At
entire
least in
purpose
your
of Brews and
opinion.
Views.
I mean, if you put them all together, it's all there. Two quick questions on the small scale.
Mhm.
So at 7th Street, basically for the last 2 weeks or maybe more, one of the large wooden posts and ropes, the bollards that are effectively there, has been over. broken,
Mhm.
you know, either you could say it represents a site hazard or a safety hazard, or somebody tried to do anything with it, who's responsible to fix that?
For fixing the fence?
Well, it's broken wood, the dirt, the ropes are on the ground, it's neither sightly nor is it necessarily safe if it invited somebody to move it around. Who's responsible for it?
Without actually seeing it and getting an understanding as to what you're specifically talking about, I wouldn't be able to say.
Okay.
I think, you know, the thought, you know,
I'll
I
send you a
couldn't tell
picture.
That'd be great. Yeah, I mean, a picture would be great, and, you know, along with Surfers Beach, a lot of things are gonna change come tomorrow. So that fence, you know, who knows what the condition of
Who
that fence
knows?
will be
No,
after.
but is that does it go to DPW if there's a concern? I just, you know.
No, the reason it's going to DPW is because, the resident has an encroachment permit from DPW. And DPW will be doing the work to remove the fence, and they will be doing the work to,
Right.
put the bollards in. And so therefore, given that they're doing the work in the right of way, they're getting the permits for it.
But before they step in, it's the owner's responsibility then?
That's my understanding,
Okay.
but don't quote me on it.
The second question, these are just small things. So above Fairlawn View School is a road that extends out to the GGNRA land
Mhm.
with mud that was a foot deep before this latest storm. It's been topic of discussion. Will you address that, or?
Sure.
No.
I mean, it's part of the hour.
No, it's part of the report. I just wasn't
No,
sure.
it's not actually part of the report.
But
That's
you can
a
address it.
separate project.
You want to talk about it, but you need to come to the microphone.
Sure, I can respond to that.
So the end of LeConte Avenue, and we know that has been a problem for a while. We actually had approached the school a while ago suggesting that maybe we coordinate with them on building a turnaround there. That part of the problem right now is that vehicles that come down there have to do sort of a 12-point turn in order to turn around and get back out. It's mostly for vehicles that are dropping off kids at school. The east side of the street there, which is the muddy mess you're talking about, has become a place for a lot of trucks during muddy weather to come out and play. So we've looked at a couple of different options. One of them is to actually facilitate this turnaround. The problem is that to actually build a turnaround in there and to compact all of the additional soil over there to fill all those ruts is going to be a much larger footprint than we anticipated at first. So what we're going to do is actually fill it this winter instead. So our maintenance crew is planning to go out and fill it and compact it and at least deal with the muddy part of it first. We're going to see how that works with the turnaround for the school and then decide if later we actually need to come back out and pave it. But it would need to be a paved turnaround, given the drainage issues there. So we're on it, we're starting on it this winter, so we do at least have the muddy part being addressed, and then we'll facilitate the turnaround later. Yep.
Any other public comment? I'll close the public comment. Oh,
Start your timer. I may drift on this one. I've enjoyed the last year, but I want to apologize to the Midcoast because there was a topic that I was very concerned about that got away from me, and I didn't get a chance to bring it as an agenda item, but I'm putting county on notice that I'm going to coming up, and that is the sale of Seton Coastside Hospital, which will be in effect at the end of this year. I was reminded of that because I had to take my son there Thanksgiving night at 2 a.m. And I may not have made the decision to do that if I had to drive over the hill and sit for 4 hours at Kaiser Redwood City. I think that most people on the Midcoast are not aware of that. I did a little research. There is no 24-hour ER between Santa Cruz and Daly City. As near as I could tell, there's not even an urgent care. There's nothing else on the Midcoast or Pescadero. The nearest facility we've got is Seton Medical in Daly City or Peninsula ER in Burlingame. On a night like tonight or tomorrow, are you going to be able to get there? I don't think it's right that the Midcoast does not have any medical facilities, and frankly, an urgent care is not enough. You can't get stitches, you can't get a broken bone set at an urgent care. We need this ER. So yes, Dave met with some people, representatives from Seton, Daughters of Charity, and they feel good about the sale to Prime Healthcare. I do not. I read the documents, the Attorney General filing, and this is my concern about Prime. They, I don't think, have any attachment to the coast side. They don't have the kind of the mission that Daughters of Charity did. And when I looked at wording in the agreement, As part of the agreement, the hospital corporation has been converted from religious to quote, business corporation status. Also, Prime says they are, quote, committed to operate, for at least 5 years after closing, subject to physician availability, the needs of the community, and financial viability. So I just don't have any confidence in Prime, and I'm very concerned. And I think that everybody on the coast side should be, as I've talked to my son's friends' parents, they don't even know this is going on. They don't, and that's why I apologize. I should have made it a bigger issue for me. I should have gotten Coastside Mothers Club involved. But I'm asking the county, I've got many questions for the county. I know the county has been providing operational funds. Will they continue to provide those funds to Prime? How much operational funds have been provided to Seton over time, weighed against the cost of that sale of that specific site? I mean, at what point do those two numbers balance out where the county might as well have just gone ahead and purchased some stake in that? What's going to be the county's oversight of that going forward? I just think that the county has, as I did, and as the Midcoast has done, has just kind of let this one slide, but you're not going to realize what a bad thing this is until it's 2 o'clock in the morning on Thanksgiving night and you've got to take somebody that you love to the emergency room. So I'm going to be on that. I'm going to bring it as an agenda item in the coming year, and I would like to understand what the county's plan is for Midcoast health going forward, since we have nothing other than Seton Coast.
Sure, you're allowed to.
I'm allowed to, I appreciate that. I do like this. I'm allowed to just kind of talk whenever. This is like a dream come true. But in all seriousness, Chris, Supervisor Horsley has made public statements that he's concerned as to what is the impact this will have on the coast side as well. He's made that very clear that he is also concerned. I have not been Supervisor Horsley's representative to this issue. I do not do his health care assignments. And so what I can do is see if there's someone who would be able to provide you guys with some information and some bring you guys up to speed on that. But Supervisor Horsley's, has expressed his concern in the past on this as well. So I appreciate you bringing this up.
Without getting into a lot of detail, can someone tell me what the next step is that's being taken with this transaction? So we have a time frame.
I'll be reporting
Oh, you're gonna
on
be
that
reporting, okay.
anyway later.
All right.
So I haven't planned to cover that particular one, but I can cover that as well.
Okay.
Cool. And
Great.
also, just being serious as well, there's an urgent care in San Mateo on El Camino. I only know this because as a child I visited it on a regular basis. So just so you know, there is a,
But
and it's
that's
right,
part of my
that's far,
point,
that's
though.
far away, right? I get that.
Anything over the hill.
Yeah.
We don't have.
No, and I understand that, and I mean, it was we were fortunate that we were pretty close to it, so I definitely understand what you're saying. I'm just, they're pretty good there.
Any other comments from the council? Okay, I have one item. Big Wave project will be heard by the Coastside Design Review Committee December 18th. Their time during the meeting is 3 p.m. That's towards the middle or the end, I don't know. And then that'll be at the Half Moon Bay Yacht Club. And the Planning Commission will hear the item again on January 14th at El Granada School, 5 p.m., same as last time. I mention this now because actually January 14th is our next regular meeting date, because we're not going to meet on Christmas Eve, and obviously we'll need to cancel that meeting. So anyway, that's the date for Big Wave. So with that, public comment is closed, and the next item is our consent agenda. Do I have a
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? All right, moving, so the first item on our regular agenda is our council annual reorganization, where we'll elect officers for the upcoming year, starting with chair, then vice chair, secretary, and treasurer, and then I will step aside. So nominations for chair.
I would like to nominate Dave.
I'll second that. I don't know if it requires a second. I actually don't know how this works, but all in favor? Dave for chair?
Aye.
Unanimous. Vice chair, nominations.
I'll nominate Chris.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, secretary, a job nobody wants. I will volunteer for this.
I will nominate Lisa.
Oh,
for the thankless
yes.
job.
Second, third, and fourth.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Treasurer,
I will nominate Dan.
second.
Yes, second that.
Do you accept, Dan?
I do accept.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, so with that, I will turn over the meeting to Dave,
Oh,
our
wow,
new
that
chair.
is such a good feeling.
All right. Well, our next agenda item, which I don't have printed out,
Here.
is the
Here we go.
Midcoast access. Thank you. I got to remember to print from now on. So Christine, you're up. And we have room for both of you up there if you want to both be there.
Okay, just give us a minute to get this set up here.
So we'll have the presentation and then any technical questions from the council, and then we'll open up public comment.
You might read the agenda item, what it's about.
Thank you very much. I've been reminded I should read the agenda item. It is the Midcoast Parklands Access and Parking Study, including the state and GGNRA areas, as well as some of the county areas on the coast.
So thank you for having us tonight. I think I know most of you. I'm Christina Fitzgerald with GGNRA, and I have with me tonight Dana Weissman from Fair and Piers. They are our consultant on this project. So I appreciate Len's point too that there are several different studies that are going on right now. So I'm guessing, yeah, that there are people that may be confused on why there are so many. So I'll give you a little bit of background on sort of why we're doing this study, but just give you a sense for what the presentation is going to be like tonight. First, we'll go through what the study purpose is and why we're specifically doing yet another transportation study on the coast side. We'll talk about what the scope of work is and specifically the study area where we're focusing. Then Dana's going to walk you through the visitor forecasts and the parking forecasts that we evaluated. And then we'll wrap up with some of the key issues and opportunities that came out of this study. Just so you know, the agency partners and consultants that have been involved with this so far. So San Mateo County has been sharing the cost with us on this. So Supervisor Horsley's office has been very involved, as has County Parks, State Parks, and then GGNRA. We realized that the reason why we're doing this is because of all the different open space destinations that are on the coast side, that we recognize that that's a big part of the traffic issues that are along the coast side are because of these open space destinations. So that's why it's these particular agency partners that are working on this together. Our consultants, Nelson Nygaard and Fair and Piers, so they're both transportation consultants that have been doing a lot of work in the county and on the coast side as well. They were involved in the Highway 1 mobility and safety studies, so they're very familiar with a lot of these issues. And I think that's also, it's not all these independent studies, it's all tied together, that there's a lot of consistency there between the partners. So the study purpose, when we finished the Highway 1 mobility study, there were a whole series of recommendations that came out of that, including some places for further analysis. One of the things that we realized that even though it provided some suggestions on where to do trailheads for GGNRA, we know that there was some resistance from the community on those locations and wanted some support to say, well, why are you choosing that location, or how large should these facilities really be? So that was part of the reason for this study, was to say, let's take a step back, look at what the recommendations were, and do a little more detailed analysis on that. We're also looking at evaluating parking demand. So right now, there hasn't been really a comprehensive study for the entire coast side, that each of the facilities so far have kind of been just pieced together with whatever available parking is there, but we've never really looked at what is the actual demand, particularly for the recreational facilities. The GGNRA trail planning, that's really what started this and why we're the ones that are leading this, even though we have a lot of partners in this study. But the reason we're leading it is because we're the ones that are the newest on the coast side, and that we're the ones that need a new facility. So we had initially thought about putting in parking at the fallow field, but again, the resistance from some of the community members saying, are you sure that's the right location? We thought, okay, we need to figure out where we want to put the trailheads before we just start designing them. And the last piece on here for the study purpose, to consider opportunities to enhance access and minimize congestion. And this is really where it feeds into the rest of the studies. So we have been partnering with Connect the Coast side and making sure that what we're doing here is informing what they're doing as well. So it's all tied together. This is just a little bit more down to the details of the parking specifically. Oh, I should mention too that initially when we started this study, we had said we were going to do 2 phases of it. One was the analysis phase. The second phase is really the access piece of it. So that was more of the design work and actually building some of the improvements to the trailheads. But for right now, all we're presenting is phase 1. This is just the analysis, and that's what we've done so far. We haven't done any of the initial designs or any of the access improvements whatsoever. We're waiting on the Connect the Coast side study to inform that. But this is just the analysis for the parking demand. So the project location, it's basically the entire coast side. We tried to figure out where was the most likely place to have our north and southern boundaries. So the northern boundary is basically up at Double Slide, and the southern boundary down near Murata Surf in El Granada. So it's the entire coast side along there and all of the open space destinations that are throughout there. So you can see in this map, that there's obviously a lot of different land managers. We tried to focus on mainly what the large ones are and mainly what's accessed from Highway 1. So we know there's other land managers that are down here, but really these are just the big ones that are causing the most congestion, I think, on Highway 1. So our scope of work, we had the consultants do quite a bit of analysis the last couple of months. They started with a review of the relevant studies, that obviously there's a lot of different studies that have been done so far, so they're not starting from scratch whatsoever. They're making sure they're plugged into everything that's already been done. The data collection, so Dana's going to go through a little bit more about the analysis, and we're not going to go through every detail of data collection because they did quite a robust data collection for the analysis, but she'll talk a little more about that, as well as the visitor forecasts. We did look at 2 horizon years, so we looked at the year 2030 and the year 2040. So we looked at sort of what are the issues we have currently, but then what's going to happen in 15 years and what's going to happen in 25 years if things continue on the trend that they've been on. So that's what Dana's going to explain to you. And then we'll wrap up with the issues and opportunities. That was part of their scope of work, is to really identify, in addition to all the other studies that have been happening, what are the other issues and opportunities specifically related to parking for these open space destinations.
Great. Thanks. So I'm going to start by walking through our approach to the visitor forecasts and show some of the results of that analysis and how we moved from visitor forecasts into parking demand forecasts. And so what you have up here is essentially a flow chart of our analysis. We started with existing conditions, looking at annual visitor counts from San Mateo County Parks and State Parks and GGNRA. And we started there and tried to figure out how do we grow these numbers to 2030 and 2040. And we took 2 different approaches. We had 2 different pieces of information that we used as building blocks for our forecast analysis. One of them was ABAG's population projections for the area, for the 9 counties of the Bay Area. And the second piece was looking at historic growth. So how have our park sites actually grown over the past 6 years, or from 2007 through 2012. So one track that we took was to look at ABAG's population projections. What was their estimated annual, average annual growth to 2040, and apply those population growth rates to our existing park visitor counts. And so that's assuming that essentially at a bare minimum, our parks visitation will grow with the growth of the population in the area, and that assumes that the only factor that we're looking at in this case is future population growth, not taking into account anything that's happened in the past or recent growth history at the parks. So that's where we kind of turn to the other side of the analysis, and we say that we're not looking at the future. We're just going to assume that these parks will continue to grow year after year after year to 2030 and to 2040 at the rate at which we've observed them to be growing over that recent 6-year period. So on the one hand, we have our lower bound of at a minimum, based on the slow rate of growth of the population in the region, we'll see the parks at least growing in visitation with the population around it. And then on a higher end, and what we're considering an unconstrained upper bound, is assuming that recent growth will continue at the same rate going forward to 2030 and 2040. And one thing to keep in mind about this upper bound is that it doesn't take into account any of the natural constraints of the sites themselves. It's not saying that you can't physically fit that many people at this site. That doesn't make any sense. It's kind of it's a thought exercise, seeing what would happen if we saw this rate continue into the future. So that kind of formed the basis of our lower bound and upper bound of our range of forecasts. And the third piece, the final piece of the analysis for the visitor forecast, was saying, well, we have our parks and this is what they look like now and these are the amenities that they have now, but there are some major planned improvements at some of the sites, and we felt that those improvements would give some of these park sites just a major bump in visitation that can't be captured by the population growth and the historic growth alone. And so there are a couple of sites where we said, because of some major, maybe trail improvements or formalizing trailheads or building new facilities like bathrooms or picnic areas, that maybe a park was really only attracting a local crowd. That was kind of its service population. Maybe with all of these improvements, word gets out and people from a wider service area start coming to the park. And so that was a bump that we applied at the end at a couple of parks that we knew were going to be seeing a lot of improvements in the near future, and that would really impact the area that it was serving and attracting. So this is the framework for our approach. I'm going to go into just a bit more detail about these three elements, and then we'll look at some of the results, kind of what came out of this forecast analysis. So the first piece is looking at that lower bound, the ABAG population projections, and these are the growth rates that we use to generate the lower bound estimates. And so you can see that ABAG is projecting for San Mateo County alone a 0.8% annual growth rate to 2040, and for what we're calling the San Mateo Midcoast region, which is made up of San Mateo, San Francisco, and Santa Clara counties, a 1% annual growth rate. And just a note that we would love to have projections at a kind of smaller scale for the more local-oriented parks, and unfortunately ABAG projections are only available at the county level, and so we applied the county percentage growth rates for this piece of the analysis to the local and the county attractor parks. So that's the lower bound, and the unconstrained upper bound was based on the observed 6-year growth rate that we saw at the park sites. And so these are the 8 key study park sites that we are looking at for our analysis, and you can see based on the font size of the parks themselves which ones have really just blown up over that 6-year time period. It ranges from, I guess, as low as 1.5% at Murata Surf and Corey Wicklow and Montera, McNee, but you can see that Fitzgerald Marine Reserve and Pillar Point have seen an amazing level of annual growth between 2007 and 2012. So that's a phenomenon that we don't necessarily anticipate will continue year after year after year to 2030 and 2040, largely because it just physically can't. But you'll see what the effect of that would be, and kind of the amazingly high kind of upper bounds that we found for this range of forecasts. I just want to point out that you'll note that some of these growth rates have an asterisk next to them, and that's because for some of the parks, we do not actually have annual numbers available. So for example, Devil's Slide essentially just opened this year, and so they only have information for this year visitation, and so we used a methodology to, with the help of GGNRA and county park staff and state park staff, to kind of identify comparable or representative parks that we could use where we did have annual visitation data, use those rates and apply them to the parks where we don't have annual rates going back.
And just so you know too, that this is just kind of our summary of the analysis, but the full report will be done by the end of the year, and so we're going to release that as well, so you can see kind of the background and all the numbers that are associated with this. This is just kind of the highlight overview, but you'll be able to review the report as well.
Yep. And so that was the lower bound and the upper bound inputs, and finally that last step is what we were calling a typology shift. So a park like Rancho, which we would consider currently to be more of a county attractor, but we know that it has a lot of major improvements planned going forward, and is predicted to become more of a regional attractor. That bump in its typology is associated with a certain amount of growth in annual visitation. And the same for Quarry Wicklow, more of a local, informal attractor, now becoming more of a county service area attractor as it's formalized and as a lot of improvements go in. And so going from a county attractor, pulling from a county visitor base to a more regional attractor, we've estimated that Rancho, on top of its lower bound and upper bound growth rates, would see a bump of about 360,000 annual visitors.
And again, this is over the course of the next 25 years, though, not necessarily next
Looking
year.
out to 20, yeah, yes, in 2040, that's how many more it would see after the percentage growth is applied, and 85,000 for Quarry Wicklow. So that's our approach for the visitor forecast, and this shows where we stand now for each of the 8 park study sites under the existing annual visitation, and that was again compiled from information provided by state parks, county parks, and GGNRA. Looking at the lower bound forecasts, which are essentially just at a minimum, we think these parks will grow as the population that they serve grows. The high end of the forecasts are projecting out year after year after year the observed growth rate that we saw between 2007 and 2012. And I mean, you can see at Fitzgerald Marine Reserve, where we saw 12.7% growth, annual growth between 2007 and 12, we're looking at over 4 million visitors in 2040. So again, this is kind of, you know, where we started, and we start to we go back and apply some of the constraints as we move into the parking forecast. So we see how these visitor growth numbers, what they imply for parking demand forecasts, and start to figure out site by site where we really do fall on the potential range of demand in the future. So in order to take this from visitors to parking, we essentially looked at the percentage growth in visitation between the existing most recent year of data available and the 2040 forecast, and applied those growth rates to what we currently observe as the maximum parking demand at the study sites. And so this takes us into the parking forecasts, which follow a similar approach, starting with existing conditions. Part of our data collection effort was to go out during peak weekend conditions and record the maximum observed parking occupancy at the lots along the study area. And with those as our base, applying the growth rate that we estimated through the visitor forecasts. Again, we had our lower bound and our upper bound, and so those growth rates are now applied to the parking numbers that we saw to create a parking demand lower bound estimate and a parking demand upper bound estimate. And from that demand estimate, we were able to generate an excess parking demand number. So based on what the existing formal capacity is at these locations, by how much does demand exceed supply, basically? So what is our deficit that we're anticipating for 2030 and 2040? And so again, like Christina said, our analysis was for 2 horizon years, 2030 and 2040, but I'm showing 2040 here. 2030 is just slightly smaller because they haven't had as much time to grow. So here is essentially the first cut of our range of need for parking in the area. And so you can see that currently, under the maximum observed parking occupancy column, that we have a number of sites that are currently over capacity. There's spillover parking, so we see more people parking there than there's actually formal capacity for. So places like Devil's Slide and Fitzgerald Marine Reserve and Montera McNee. Some locations, like Point Montero Light Station, are very underutilized currently. Some are right on the border, like Graywell Cove, and so based on the formal parking capacity and our anticipated demand from the percentage growth that we calculated using the visitor forecast methodology, we can see in the columns to the right how much excess demand we have in 2040 based on the lower bound estimate and the unconstrained upper bound estimate. And the lower bound estimate, we would be looking about 199 spaces needed to meet this at a minimum demand, and in a lot of ways just tying growth to population projections is not, it's not quite accurate and is not capturing all the nuances, so that's kind of why we consider it as at a minimum about 200 spaces, and then on the upper end it's, well, 2,700 is a lot of spaces, but you can see that that's driven very largely by Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. And so if you take out those 2,200 right there, you're at about 500 spaces needed. And so that's kind of why we liked the thought of having a range, and then looking site specifically, being able to decide where kind of along those range each of the sites really had the need.
Can I just ask a question? When you say Fitzgerald Marine Reserve, Pillar Point Bluff, are you including Pillar Point itself? Or, I mean, because there's basically the northern area, the middle area, and the south area. A lot of people, they just think Fitzgerald Marine Reserve is there in West Moss Beach, but then there's also the trailhead on Airport Street, and there's also parking off of West Point Avenue near the harbor.
Yeah, I don't think it
doesn't include that.
I don't think so.
So you're just talking about it was in West Moss Beach that these counts were taken in the neighborhood there.
I don't think this includes the neighborhood parking.
Well, I mean, where it says 113% increase, is that because?
113% is what is currently the occupancy, so it's far exceeding what the available capacity is currently.
So are you doing your counts? Are you including the trailhead parking on Airport Street and the parking down there at the harbor to go out to Pillar Point, because that's also part of the Marine Reserve. People go out there, tide pooling as well. I just wondered where you're doing the counts.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly in this area if we were counting the vehicles where you're talking about. I think it was more, I think a lot of our spillover at a lot of these sites was along Highway 1 and in some of the kind of informal pullout areas. We did look at the neighborhood streets, and it was a bit of a subjective cutoff of, you know, where the site parking ends and where other neighborhood use parking begins. I do have the boundaries, but I can share it, but I'm not quite sure at this point.
We're all really interested in all the background details,
Yeah.
that data, yeah.
Yeah, we can certainly share that, and then if there are locations that we didn't include here, that you'll see towards the end of it too, that what we're recommending at this point in time is actually to start with more monitoring strategy and start continuously counting some data so that we can form a more accurate pattern over time. And so if we missed something at this point in time, we can certainly go back and count it and include it in our next round of it then.
It's certainly including something other than the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve Park.
Yeah, right.
If it's
There's not
counting
any part.
89.
Yeah, exactly. So we can look at the official data collection of how they map that.
Hard to fit in that.
I mean, the one point of this too, that we're recognizing that, I mean, I see a lot of kind of like raised eyebrows or sort of laughing at the Fitzgerald, like the upper number there. We recognize that's unrealistic. You know, the point of this is really just to show there's going to be somewhere between this 200 and maybe 500 spaces that you would need to have by 2040. But what we'll go through next too, you can see that we're not recommending that you actually go out and build 200 or 600 parking spaces. We have some other strategies of what we should do instead.
So I wasn't the one who did the data collection, but I have some notes on from the person who did, and hopefully this is helpful. So the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve and Pillar Point Bluff parking numbers capture the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve formal parking area, the Pillar Point Bluff small parking area, the Moss Beach Distillery parking lot, and the overflow lot adjacent to Moss Beach Distillery. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Right, and there's also,
Yeah.
there's also
Okay.
a county overflow lot on West Point out there near the
Okay.
near the marsh.
So we can add that one then to our data collection.
Could you read that list one more time?
Yeah, sure. The Fitzgerald Marine Reserve formal parking area, Pillar Point Bluff small parking area, Moss Beach Distillery parking lot, and the overflow lot adjacent to the Moss Beach Distillery.
I don't think you included anything that relates to people going to the Pillar Point area itself.
Yeah.
That would be the small lot, the second item she read.
Yeah.
You forgot the Mavericks lot.
Yeah.
People walk up.
Small lots
Okay.
from the avenue.
So I think what might be helpful is that when we actually share the report with you, that if you can look at each of the site
Yeah.
locations, and if there are specific locations that we missed, that please let us know those.
This is what we've been doing with Plan Princeton and the Connect the Coast Side. We had a member on the TAC and could review these early documents and point out these areas that, if you didn't live around here, you wouldn't, have that necessarily all straight, so we'd be glad to
Great.
look that over.
Yeah, we're still very much in draft form. This is, again, why we separated and did just phase 1 first to do some analysis, and then phase 2 we'll do the recommendations, but we're still in the very much draft analysis phase, so that's why we're here to get this kind of feedback, so.
Can we ask one question? Can I ask a question? Do you have maps you can show these areas? That might be really helpful.
We don't have it in our presentation. I mean, I have the whole map of where the entire area was, but we didn't zoom into each one of these for the presentation because we have a lot of slides and not a lot of time, but we can share that in the report.
Oh, that would be very helpful, I think.
Sure.
Save you time also, otherwise you're going to be answering the same
Yeah.
questions
Right.
over and over again.
Right.
Yeah.
It's certainly true.
So can we let them finish the report, and then we'll have to try and take notes on what you have questions about, hold on to it.
Sure. So based on the analysis then, we came up with a series of key issues and opportunities, and you'll see a lot of these are consistent then with some of the other studies. You've seen a lot of these already from the Highway 1 Mobility and Safety, but what this does is drill down a little bit more into this new parking data that we have and the new visitor forecasts, and try to make some recommendations specific to that, so we can offset some of that need for parking. So rather than building 200 or 600 parking spaces in the next 20 years, where can we start to offset some of that specifically related to the recreational demand? So I'm going to go through each one of these key issues very specifically. So first one is to continue to improve the bike and ped connectivity. Again, this is more related to that access issue. I'm not going to go through each of these in detail because this is also more related to the Connect the Coast side, but continuing the bike and ped that will minimize the need for vehicle parking on the coast side. Potential for a regional shared parking strategy. So this is why we decided to do this as a shared study between all these different partners. Rather than GGNRA coming in and building a new trailhead that's just for GGNRA, that seemed like that's not going to really solve some of the problem there. A lot of people come down to visit a certain area. They'll visit several destinations in an area as opposed to just one. We've observed people that are parking at Montero State Beach and going across to Rancho and vice versa, up and down the coast side, that we see people just parking where they can and visiting whichever destinations they want. So the idea of doing more of a regional shared parking strategy is why all of us are working together on this and hoping that we can use the existing lots where possible, build the minimum amount of parking that we really need, but then really to encourage people to use all of these lots for various facilities as opposed to just one entity. So we did notice too in our analysis that the Samtrans park and ride lots in both Pacifica and Half Moon Bay are obviously pretty busy during peak rush hour and congestion during the week, but on the weekends there's a lot of availability. So looking at existing surface lots is something that we think would be really beneficial in potentially offsetting some of this parking demand. Similarly, the Harbor District, that as they're starting now their economic process to figure out sort of what they're doing with their facilities there, that's also another potentially good lot that we can partner with them on how we can do a shared parking strategy. Same thing with the Half Moon Bay Airport, that we know that there have been some comments about potentially using that as trailhead or some shared parking as well. So rather than, again, building individual lots, then partnering with people that already have lots where we can just share them instead. A regional paid parking program, and this is something that I know that may be a little concerning to see at first, but there actually have been several paid parking that has been implemented recently throughout the coast side that has been very successful. So Pacifica State Beach is one of the most recent ones where they're realizing that For one thing, it at least shifts the demand around. So if you implement parking at some of your higher demand locations, people that don't want to necessarily pay to park, they'll find another location. So it helps distribute a lot of that demand throughout the region. For coastside residents then, there's potential to do a sort of an annual permit as opposed to having to pay every time you go, so you get a significant discount by being a coastside resident. We could consider doing residential permit areas or residential benefit districts. And this is really for the residents that are close to some of these destinations, that if your neighborhood is starting to see an increase, then if someone's parking or doesn't want to pay for the parking in one lot and they start to spill over into the neighborhoods, we need a way to control that and manage that so it's not negatively impacting the neighborhood. So paid parking is one potential strategy. Improving wayfinding, we think this is a very easy one that we can do immediately. That right now there's a lot of lots we realize, like for example, the Graywell Cove area, that people don't realize where parking currently is available. Same thing at the Oceana Hotel. When that development permit was approved, they were required to provide 90 public parking spaces that I just don't think a lot of people know is available. So there's a lot of parking like that that we could just easily direct people to, and I think particularly for people that don't know the area, that this would be really beneficial in getting them off of your neighborhood streets and really directing them to appropriate parking areas. The last one on here too, messaging about coastside access on park websites. So for all of these land managing agencies then, that often when people are coming to one of the park destinations, the first thing they do is go look at the website. And so if we can start directing people saying, hey, park here, not on the neighborhood streets or not on Highway 1, then that will certainly help them as well. Transit, this is one that obviously throughout several different studies now you're seeing a lot more recommendations towards transit. So again, I won't go into details on some of the service characteristics, but I will talk a little more about the potential parking areas. So I mentioned Samtrans that has several park and ride lots. And this would be something that would need to be partnered then with Samtrans or with a regional shuttle that could help support some of that. So again, rather than building new surface lots, there's a lot of surface lots that are available. We can just partner with them on sharing that parking and shuttling outside visitors to these locations. And the last one here on the key issues and opportunities is monitoring growth. So rather than starting right now and saying we're going to go out there and build these 600 parking spaces because we might need them in 25 years, that seems like a really silly way to do things. So what we're suggesting instead is to actually monitor the growth. So as Dana explained, we have sort of our two ranges. We have one that if we follow ABAG's projections, here's how much it's going to grow. And we have, if we follow what's been happening here, which we know is pretty significant in some locations, it's going to grow to here. So continuing to monitor that and see what realistically happens, that, you know, for whatever reason Fitzgerald Marine Reserve has grown this much in the last several years, that may taper off. Or same thing with Devil's Slide, that the first year may have been really attractive that first year, but we'll see if that visitation continues at that level. So continuing to monitor that over the next couple of years I think will be really critical in determining what's really appropriate for 2030 and 2040. Paving, formalizing, and signing the informal lot just up from Graywell Cove. So again, I mentioned that there's certain lots that really could use some improvement already. We could maximize the parking in the existing lots rather than having to build new ones. Formalizing the roadside parking at Montara State Beach. This one's the Highway 1 parking. A lot of people do end up parking on Highway 1. We recognize this requires Caltrans approval, permission. That one's quite a hurdle at times, but I think that that's a good opportunity where we could actually capture some formal parking as well. And then the last one, a new shared parking facility at Fallow Field. So this is the one that came out of the Highway 1 mobility study for GGNRA. This is still a location that we think is appropriate, that we have an easement over that area to build parking. So it is still our preferred location because it keeps people out of the neighborhoods. It's something that's right off of Highway 1. It's very visible, and we have the space to build something of that size. So that's still our preferred location, but rather than have it be GGNRA parking, it would be a shared parking for visitors on the coast side. So the last slide here I'm going to show is a phasing approach. So again, the monitoring strategy is really going to be important to kind of see where things are going to go in the long term, but rather than starting right off the bat with any of these improvements, we think some of the simple things, kind of the low-hanging fruit, the wayfinding signage I mentioned, that one's a really easy one that we could easily implement right now and start directing people to some of the other locations. We can talk about this shared parking with potential partners. This is one that we, as the agency partners that prepared this study, obviously are on board with this, but now's the time to start talking to the Harbor District and other partners where we can figure out how can we do this shared parking. Formalizing some of the existing lots, and then really starting a more comprehensive discussion with the county and with other potential funders on what makes sense in terms of, do we want to do, not funders, but with the community on, do we want to do a regional paid parking strategy, something along those lines? Does it make sense? What are the costs and benefits associated with that? And then we'll start continuing the monitoring. Whoops. So that's our presentation in a nutshell. Like I said, we have the report that will support all this and have all the details within it. We did a first round of this and realized that the information we had initially was not going to be robust enough for all of you to understand sort of what this is and to validate what the study is. But I think at this point in time, we actually do have quite a good amount of information to share with you all, and hopefully it makes sense for what you're seeing out there on a day-to-day basis currently. It also gives you kind of a roadmap for some possibilities of things we can do to help alleviate some of the issues there. But we're hoping that what this informs then is kind of the direction that we'll go with GGNRA's Trailhead to eventually build that in the near future. So with that, we'll open it to questions.
So before that, so the process we're going to follow is council can ask technical questions, clarifying questions, and then we'll go to public comment and questions, and then we'll come back to the council for opinions and discussion. So try and keep it technical this first time around.
Do I get to go?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious to know how you measure visitors. So when you have a visitor count, how does that happen?
So luckily, state parks and county parks both have much better data than GGNRA does for Rancho. Obviously, since Rancho is still new to us, we don't have visitor data. So a lot of the sites that county parks or state parks collected, so on some locations where they have at, say, Putter County Park, they have a paid parking facility. So they monitor every single vehicle that comes in, they track all of it that way. So they have pretty robust counts. Same thing with Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. If people need to come in there and register, they know exactly how many people are at each site. I don't have their methodology on their counts on how they do it at some of their other sites that doesn't collect that information, but at some of the GGNRA sites, we have vehicle counters at trailhead entrances. So that way we know how many vehicles are entering there on a daily basis. For Rancho, we don't have any data yet. So what we did was use comparable data for other sites. So we used something similar to McNee Ranch because it's the same population that is using it. It's the same size roughly. It's the same type of experience. So for the sites that we didn't have robust data for, we used comparable sites nearby to estimate. So we know that this isn't a hard and fast science whatsoever, that estimating recreational demand is actually a really difficult thing to do. And so we know that these numbers aren't, I mean, it's not going to say exactly 199 parking spaces is what you need. It's saying this is a reasonable estimate based on what we know and the data we've collected so far and what's comparable at other sites.
I'd like to understand the process. So for example, you've got this information here, and then where is it going to go from here, and what's going to be accomplished as a result?
So we're going to send this report around to the community then, so we can get your feedback on that to see are there locations where we may have missed some data collection. What we're going to do then is work with the county again to figure out which of these strategies do we want to implement immediately. So something like the wayfinding, that's something that we can work together with that internal group again to implement. And then start with the monitoring so we can see what needs to happen. But we're not making any recommendations or decisions on any of this yet. Our next phase of this is going to be to take the analysis and develop some recommendations. But we think we need kind of that interim buffer first to do some additional monitoring before we can go into phase 2.
And my last question, Mr. Chair. And that is, I was on the parking committee, I believe with Len, that we had started out with a couple years ago, and that was composed of representatives from different agencies, et cetera. And I'm wondering what's changed from our initial meeting a couple years ago that's brought us here. What took place that created this particular situation? Or report, or how you're working now?
The way we're working now is mostly just based on the major land managers on the coast side that agreed that they didn't necessarily want to implement individual parking lots anymore for each individual site. So we agreed that let's look at a regional strategy and just do data collection analysis right now. It wasn't supposed to be anything that was making recommendations for the community. It was just, here are the land managers, here's the information we have, let's piece that together. And so that's what the last year has basically been, just kind of collecting that information. And now we're at the point where we're ready to share this with other people and bring more partners into this to start saying, what is our strategy? But this was really just, yeah, kind of the land managers, data collection and analysis, very, very bare bones, and just data collection finding.
Thank you.
Chris?
Excuse me. Sorry, I'm not feeling too well, so a little froggy here. You mentioned, with regard to the paid parking strategy, some successes in Pacifica, and I have a couple questions about that. First, what entity is managing the actual day-to-day mechanics of the pay? You know, who collects the money, who processes that, who maintains the parking meters, and, you know, who's doing that? And then the second question is, how is the success measured? What are the success points that came out of that?
I believe it's the City of Pacifica that's managing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they have they might have a contractor doing that, but I'm not sure.
As far as the data or the fee collections, there's various ways they can do that. Obviously, you can either put up the pay by phone. You can have. I mean, are you talking more about the actual mechanics of how that works, or?
Yeah, I think I was getting to more of what Dana was getting to. I mean, I don't want to make a comment, but you know, now we're bringing in vendors, and you know, like we're adding more layers, you know, and those vendors are going to take a cut, and blah blah blah. And so it seems like it's getting, you know, complicated there. City of Pacifica is not unincorporated Midcoast. But then also, what were these successes? How are those measured? You know, like what constitutes a success in that term?
The success in that sense was mostly about, they were having a similar problem with congestion in terms of parking, that everyone wanted to park right at the beach, right? So their preferred location is as close as they can get. So by implementing a paid parking program, it starts to distribute that parking elsewhere. So they've seen a balance, or a better balance of where parking is going, so it's not all congested at the same location. I think that's a lot of what the problem is right now on the Midcoast, is that you're seeing everyone concentrated in certain locations, where if they knew they could go elsewhere, or they knew they had to pay to park at the prime locations, they may shift their preferred location. So that's what success really is just kind of showing distribution and reducing the congestion that's being caused by this high demand location for parking. But as far as the actual implementation of all that, that's just, the recommendations here are, this is the next stage that we can study, and that's one of the things we can consider. We're not saying we're going to go out and implement paid parking tomorrow whatsoever. We're just saying that if we start with the wayfinding, and we start with some of these simpler improvements like formalizing the existing lots, and if that's still not working, then what do we do? And so these are kind of just steps along the way of how else we can solve some of the problems, and that's one of the successful techniques that we could use.
I guess just the last comment on that, sorry, is that in the formal report, I guess I personally would like to see some more details on that, because saying that, you know, we had success because now this area isn't congested. Well, where exactly did everybody else go? I mean, it's now there are a bunch of cars in Lindemar.
Exactly.
You know, where and, you know, what, so are we just, you know, whack-a-moling this traffic around? You know, what details on the specifics, and then the metrics of like how that was measured and what is deemed, you know, success. And
yeah, totally understand. That's why we said something like the, I'll go back to the paid slide actually. So we understand that, yeah, if we start doing something like that with automated pay stations, that we recognize then it's going to shift the problem somewhere else, right? But by managing the overflow, we don't want to overburden the neighborhoods then and saying, well, now we're going to move all the parking here. We're saying there's a distributed number of lots that are available, and just making sure people can find those lots, and that they know that I can pay more if I want to be here, or I can just drive down here instead. But something like the residential permit areas or benefit districts, what that does then is it keeps people either out of the neighborhoods, or if they do park in the neighborhood, if the neighbors agree on it, then people from the outside start paying the neighborhood to come park in their neighborhood, and then you get to use that money for improvements in the neighborhood. So there's a lot of different techniques on how it works. The ones that are listed here, there's other ones in the region that have been done lately, but we can include some information in the report about how to find out more about what worked and what's successful.
thank you.
Dan?
Yes, thank you both for your presentation tonight. Question about the Gray Whale Cove parking. I did see a little bit formalized plan that was presented in the mobility study. Is that the one that's most current in
As far as I know, yes, that's the most up to date. Yep.
So has there been any other further study that you know of as far as increased use of that lot and the changes in relation to the impact of the flow of Highway 1. If we're creating a larger use in that area, more people stopping traffic and then being essentially a plug, has there been any studies on your part of that?
Well, again, that gets
potential?
back to the distribution piece, right? So it's having signage that tells people, okay, yes, you've seen this now, and you see that there's a formal parking lot here, and there's a place to park, but if it's full, where else can you go? So that's where a lot of these other strategies can help minimize that. Is that what you're, I guess I'm not sure what you're asking.
Yeah, no, it seems like, I know that, you know, on the beautiful weather days in the weekend, I've witnessed it, that parking lot can, just by people, when it's full, people pull in, they look for a spot, they find out there's no spots, and then they pull out, so they stop traffic twice. Also just the regular usage, and then, you know, it's a very, you know, it can really choke the whole flow. So if we improve it to a point that might not be.
Dan, I think you've got the answer to the actual question. Can we hold off the opinion part until after the public?
Fair enough.
Well, there's one piece I could add to that as well, then, on the wayfinding signs, or slide, we also included the changeable message sign. So similar to when you're going through the tunnel and you have signs that say, tunnel congested, slow down. A lot of parking strategies that if it's really that bad and that people are blocking traffic by doing something like that, you can put up a changeable message sign that says, parking lot full, keep going. So we do that at Muir Woods, where that's one of our biggest destinations, that we have such major traffic congestion, that we have changeable message signs, letting people know in advance of the destination, here's what's happening, okay, parking lot's full, use the shuttle, or we tell people that in advance. So that's another technique you can use. I think there was some sensitivity to that when the tunnel was being constructed, related to, having electronic signs that tell people things, just given the visual impact it'll have. But I think, again, that's why we want to monitor and see how bad does it get, and if it's still bad, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox that we can use to tell people, don't park here, it's already full, keep going.
Okay.
Yes. The Highway 1 Safety Mobility Study had an action plan, and in there it said, before you do any parking, we need a Midcoast parking study. Now, I understand you're not the county, that was the county's, but is this going to qualify as that parking study? In other words, when this is done, this document is adopted, will then the action plan will say, okay, we've done our parking study. Is that what this is? Anybody?
Oh, I mean, that's my understanding, is that's part of the reason why we were doing this. That was part of the action plan, but it was also our need to figure out, we don't need to build one parking lot, we need a regional parking strategy. So to me, this study will fulfill that. I'll leave it to Nicholas to.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wasn't sure if that was my
Yeah.
question.
Yeah,
or
go
if
ahead.
I wasn't sure. if
You
that was-
agree?
If you know the answer, go
All right,
ahead.
so in other words, as we comment and as we take our time and we get the full material, and perhaps we comment as a council, basically, we need to consider that whatever we thought needed to be in this parking study, this is it.
Right.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
You had one other comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, I just really wanted to stress, because I had the image in my head of getting a phone call tomorrow from someone yelling at me saying that the county's gonna start charging for parking at parks, or that the county's gonna start requiring residential permits. Just that I really wanted to stress that these are just ideas that are meant to start specific conversations, and that everything is, nothing has been selected, everything's open for conversation with these. But in no way, shape, or form is tomorrow the county gonna start charging for parking, or are we gonna start requiring residents to get permits to park in their neighborhoods? Or is the county saying, you know, one of the things Supervisor Horsley and I discussed in pretty good detail was the idea of having residential parking permits and that kind of stuff. And that was something that kind of raised a red flag for him. So, like I said, I just all of a sudden got this flash in my head of just getting yelled at tomorrow. So, which may still happen, but I just wanted to stress that it's, you know, we haven't adopted anything, and we're not, you know, saying yes, we're doing this. I just wanted to clarify that one. Thank you.
And that's also the reason why we have this phasing approach here. It's that a lot of this, it's tools in the toolbox, but we're not just saying, here's everything you can possibly do. We're saying, no, there's actually a very strategic reasons why we're recommending some of these, but that potential phasing approach is really start small. Start with, you know, the simple things first, figure out what works, and then see where you're still having problems and then adjust accordingly. But it's really to start small, and what we realize is there's a lot of availability out there, just people don't know about it, or there's a lot of opportunities to partner with people where we can fix some of these problems without having to build new lots.
I had one quick question. Is the term informal parking at Greatwell Cove simply because it's not a designated state parking lot?
Yeah, and I think also because it's a dirt lot instead of something paved with like.
Okay, I was looking for the definition. I don't think most people would regard that informal. Most people regard that as the Greatwell Cove.
Is it because there's no striping?
Partially, and we did find that it wasn't as utilized as.
Oh, it's absolutely and utterly full
You're
on nice
talking about
weekends.
different lot. There's two parts.
I know, there's the upper dirt and there's the lower
Right.
dirt, and they are both absolutely
Oh,
full
okay, you're
on a
talking
nice
both.
day.
Okay.
I've seen, just, what was it, 2 weeks ago? They were both completely and utterly full.
People realize the other one.
Okay, so now we're on to public comment. I have 2 slips. If you're making a public comment, please come to the podium. Neil, you're up first.
Neil Marilees, Coastside resident and Midcoast representative of the San Mateo County Park Commission. First, I want to say thank you, Lisa, for a great chairmanship here, and thanks to the rest of the MCC. You guys have had a great year, and it's been wonderful to have you. So thank you. You know, 80% of the things that we talk about at the MCC and that the Coastside cares about are in this little memo, which is amazing. It's action-packed. You know, it's beach access, traffic, parking, and connectivity of trails, and public transportation. So yeah, it's pretty much everything. And so I wanted to weigh in really quickly while you're getting started. I think the shared parking idea is great. It's not a novel concept. It's been talked about in the past, but one of the barriers has been the planning department. You know, like with the Harbor District, you put in a slip, you need a parking space. And so you can't really use that parking space for something else, yet when you drive by, there are openings, and there's parking there. Why can't you use it? You know, so anyway, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a great idea. Another part of shared parking is kind of reverse parking. You know, there are a lot of state parks lots that are empty during the week. Those would be great ride-share lots during the week. They're probably being used to capacity or close on the weekends, but during the week they're not. There's space in the Caltrans right-of-way. The airport property, you know, the north end of the airport is right next to the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve, and the south end is next to Princeton and Mavericks Beach, which is also the south end of the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. So it's used for special events. Why don't we use it for sunny days or for low tides? And a shuttle from there to the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve would be great. You could actually walk from the northern end of it. So that's perfectly situated. So thank you for bringing that up. I think you forgot, I didn't see it, the Mavericks lot. That's filled past capacity on every day where there's good surf, and on every weekend. So take a look at that one. That's highly used. What else? There's one more thing. Oh, yeah, please, thank you for bringing that up. Please do not do the resident-only parking thing. You know, I moved here 25 years ago with my eyes wide open. I knew that this was a desirable place to live, and I knew that since I thought it was a desirable place to live, other people would want to come. And I'm willing to share. You know, we have episodic parking problems here. When it's sunny, we have a problem. When it's a Mavericks contest, we have a problem. When it's Pumpkin Festival, sometimes we have a problem up this far north. There's another, Dream Machines, we have a problem. But maybe 20, 25 days a year we have parking problems. But the resident-only thing would be it wouldn't be just for 25 days a year, because you can't forecast when those days are going to be. So it would be every day, it would be permanent. We talked about it years ago when the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve wanted to charge for parking. And if you can't charge for parking unless you have parking restrictions in the neighborhoods. Because if you charge for parking, everybody will park in the neighborhood. And if you have parking restrictions 5 blocks out, people will park 6 blocks out. And if you, you know, and on and on. So you pretty much have to cover the whole coast. And that means when people are coming over to your house, they're getting parking tickets. Anyway, it's episodic. I think that's draconian. If we have to go that way, that would be unfortunate. I feel like then we're kind of living in a private community where the residents get special benefit. And I hope we don't have to go down that route. So I'm willing to share. I hope other people on the coast are still willing to share. I know every once in a while it's kind of a lot to put up with. But we live in a beautiful place, and other people think it's beautiful too. So they're going to come, and there will be more coming in the future because it's looking better and better, thanks to some of the things that the county is doing. So thanks for your action-packed report, and I look forward to seeing it continue. And thank you.
Thank you.
Leonard, you're up next.
Leonard Warren, El Granada. I agree with at least more or less with Neil's comments about residential parking. And in fact, if you check with Half Moon Bay, an incident that happened there 10 or 12 years ago, I think you'll find out the Coastal Commission simply will not allow residential permit parking in the coastal zone, period. Real short answer, where's the San Mateo lot 92? The park and ride?
Is it behind Safeway?
Yeah, I believe it's the lot next to Safeway.
San Mateo Road.
Yeah, it's the lot next to Safeway.
Yeah, well, first of all, a lot of people don't even know the San Mateo Road is SR 92, but anyway, yeah, I don't know what the park and ride lot is.
We can include that in our maps when we share where our data collection was done.
Okay. So regarding the roadside parking at Montera State Beach, unless it's far enough away from the travel lanes that, and now I don't know if you have in mind parallel parking or diagonal parking, but in either case, it has to be far enough away from the travel lanes that people positioning to get into the space or even just looking for a space do not, even by this much, impact the through traffic, or I will be totally opposed to it all the way to the Coastal Commission. You have to make sure that it does not impact the through stuff, which I think is what Dan was trying to get at. Because that's a perpetual problem. In general, I'm completely opposed to roadside parking on the highway, and you know that includes El Granada, which is outside the scope of your report. And you know, of course, I was going to comment on neighborhood parking. Neil kind of said everything and more that I would have said, but yeah, exactly what he said. If you have the permit parking district for 5 blocks, people will park 6 blocks away. So if you charge for parking, it has to be low enough that people will pay it rather than walk the extra distance. You know, a few bucks, not 10. The primary reason why I submitted a speaker slip, I'm holding that one for last. Some years ago, when the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve Master Plan was being done, long enough ago that I've completely forgotten how long ago it was, but a decade or something. One of the things that was discussed is that the reefs are being loved to death, and there was talk of essentially closing it completely to visitors for a few years to let it recover and shifting the visitors down to the other end of FMR, which is next to Pillar Point Harbor. Now, I don't know whatever happened with that. Apparently it didn't go anywhere, but I think you need to be careful and factor in that that still might happen, and you have to provide for parking there, which means that pothole parking lot, you know, I forget what you called it, but I'm just going to insist on calling it pothole parking lot until it's fixed, needs to be, you know, 4 or 10 times the size that it is. And it needs to be fixed so that it's not pothole parking lot. But you need to research whether or not there's still any thought being given to shifting the visitors down to the other end of FMR to let the reefs recover. Thank you.
Bill, you're up next.
Okay, Bill Keel, West Beach. Thank you, Christine and Dana, for a titillating report. I'm actually looking for more detail. I agree with Laura on Some of those numbers you're projecting, and I know it's an inexact science, but, you know, I see 400,000 visitors a year coming out here, you know? And of course, even, well, that's what the numbers show. Even if we solve the parking problem, we'll have the Route 1 problem, because we already have the Route 1 problem today, going both north and south, since the tunnel opened. At least before, I used to be able to sneak into Lindemar if I needed last-minute groceries on the weekends. That's no longer a case. You're stuck in traffic whether you go south to Half Moon Bay or north. So the things I like, I mean, we do have to have an integrated parking plan. I appreciate that you're tackling this. It's always going to be a mess. It worries me when I see you saying things like Pacifica charging. Naturally, that's going to shift the population down into the Midcoast because, and it's a standard joke out here, you know, why do people come here? Because it's free. You know, you can come out here and you can literally do a lot of stuff, basically free. You don't have to pay to park. You don't have to pay for anything if you don't want to. And that's fine. I agree with Neil. And I'm only saying this to kick you off, Neil. That it's one of the joys of living in the coastal zone and living here, because Monday through Friday, because I'm retired, I get it all to myself. And the weekends, I hunker down and do something else, clean the gutters. So I like what you're doing with it, but I think a bigger emphasis as part of this, and maybe you'll have to do some kind of a fee at the lots to pay for it, but the whole idea of building up a much better shuttle system. Samtrans, we've gone to numerous meetings with Samtrans. I know Laura has that too. I mean, they're like any business. They look at the cost justification for these things. We don't have the ridership, so you know they do, with enough twisting from the county, keep a certain level of service out here, but it's not being paid for by the passenger rate. And that's just that's not sustainable. We know that's going to fail over a certain point of time. So something like that, where people do want to come into the coast, and we do have that issue. I would like to see more parking and shuttles to alleviate all those traffic issues that the previous speakers were talking about, with people stopping on the highway looking to pull in or coming in or out, egressing from other lots that are already full. That's really important, and I don't want to spill over. The thing that Chris was mentioning about charging in Pacific, I think I already mentioned that just shifts them down here. But that whole idea of putting in an infrastructure to do that is, again, a double-edged sword, because then the money ends up going in just to supporting that system, and that eventually just takes away from any other kind of visitor stuff we want to do out here. There was one other thing. You didn't go into it a whole lot, but I know when I was on the council, it was a big concern of people in Montero. Any parking lots that you build, especially up there in the fallow field, which is kind of still a testy situation with North Monterians, I want it to be as low impact as possible. I mean, I know GGNRA loves to put up kiosks. Now the county's beginning to get the same thing, where they stick a kiosk in the middle of a sidewalk over by the Moss Beach Post Office. I was going to bring a picture tonight, so people know that Go Native put in this little rain swell. And it's right in the middle of the sidewalk. It's like if you're reading the newspaper walking along, it's going to kneecap you. It's like, Anyway, so low impact, I mean, it doesn't have to be striped. Nice gravel with me is fine. People can usually figure out how to park parallel, but keep it alive.
Lynn, you're up next.
Thank you. Lynn Erickson from El Granada. Great job. I was looking at two reports today. One was the 119-page Connect the Coast report presented to the Planning Commission, and then your somewhat shorter report. You've got a lot more in a lot less space. It's also one of the reasons why I've encouraged Nicholas to ask Don to expand the scope of what he talks about. And I think it'd be clear from everybody's comments here why that's appropriate.
One thing I should clarify, the section that we released for review, that was just the issues and opportunities. That's not the full report. So there's still more to read, but.
And so much more meat. Okay. Several people have talked about the structure in which you organize the parking. And I don't want to go into that in detail, but just to make two comments. One is you use joined phrases like Pillar Point to Fitzgerald. or in Devil's Slide, North and South, or Green Valley Trail. And if you had a California Coastal Trail there, it would make sense. But basically, nobody goes to the Devil's Slide Trail to really walk the coastal trail. And in fact, I think the breakdown that would be interesting is how many people go to the north or south parking lot, park and leave, as opposed to how many actually walk across the trail. I think there's very few people that actually walk the trail, and several 100,000 that basically get out of their car and look at the viewpoints there. Not sure what that impact is. And then until you get the Green Valley Trail, which connects down to the Gray Whale Cove parking, you just got separate pieces, so trying to figure out how that fits together is important, but don't exactly know how to do it. Pillar Point and Fitzgerald, I think what you did is looked at harbor parking lots as separate, because when people see Pillar Point, they think of the harbor parking lots. The bumpy dirt, as Leonard likes to refer to it, an auxiliary lot and possibly one near Pillar Ridge. So I think if you would break those apart, I think people are either going to Pillar Point Bluffs or they're going to Fitzgerald. That would make a lot more sense. And then those are both along the coastal trail. At Murata Surf and Quarry Park, you link those, but Quarry Park is an internal park into El Granada, so there's parking issues there. But when you get to Murata Surf, you have the Burnham Strip parking and several other parking lots along it. And certainly people would like to see those quantities separate. Okay. It was brought up very subtly by our gracious former chair about having an MCC rep on your committee or directly in your process. That was the case originally when I was still on the MCC, and I'd like to see you in some way incorporate someone there directly speaking for the MCC. Although Nicholas stood up and made the disclaimer that we weren't talking about paying for parking tomorrow, if you're doing a 25-year study, clearly you have to talk about paid parking. So I think you need to step up to that. I mean, not in a negative sense, but it's clearly there, and I thought you put it forward in a way people could look at it. So nobody here said it's going to get charged tomorrow, but it's clearly there to talk about. So I sort of commend you for the bravery there. And that's it. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wants to make a public comment? Chris, what is a member of the public? Go ahead.
So for comments, yeah, I want to kind of echo what's been said and what you already get a sense of, which is personally I'm opposed to the idea of paid parking. One of the things I read in the report was that it would be used as a behavior modification, to incentivize more efficient use of parking in other places. And we've already talked about the whack-a-mole. They're going to go someplace else. One thing, I don't feel like there's enough other options that if you're going to have people go somewhere else, where is that exactly? So I don't think that we really have the options to have people going to other places. But the real reason that I'm opposed to paid parking, and I think a couple other people mentioned it, that this is a rare place that you can go essentially for free. And the way I see it is when you charge for parking, especially at the premium spots, guess who then is not going to use the premium spots? Well, cheapskates, okay, but lower income people. And I just really want to protect, I think that's one of the ideas behind the Coastal Act. I don't want an economic barrier to lower income citizens who, can't afford or don't want to pay $10 for parking. And now where are they going to go? A lesser spot. It just may have been the language you use. I'm not accusing you, but you said, the popular spots will charge for those. Okay, so then the people in the Land Rovers get to go to the popular spots and the other people don't. And that just doesn't sit well with me. And again, I just can't think of the better words, but I also just feel that if we're not talking about the need to raise revenue, and I haven't seen that mentioned anywhere of like, that's why we need to do paid parking, it's more of a behavior modification. To me, and I'm sorry, the only word that comes to mind is that just seems to be like kind of old thinking or even the easy way out of like, well, let's just do this paid parking thing. And what I would like to see for ideas is, let's go 2 steps beyond. Let's not use the old strategies, the old systems, things that have maybe been used elsewhere. We've got a unique setting here. Let's innovate. Let's think out of the box and go beyond. And I don't really have great suggestions for you, but what's something that when's our most impactful time as far as parking? Weekends. What's not open on the weekends? Farallon View Elementary School and El Granada Elementary School, and they have parking lots. I mean, okay, so
you know, could we use some sharing agreement where we could use those parking lots? Is there anything else that we can do to increase the amount of parking available without this fee-paid parking? The last thing, and again, I think it was Neil, you know, to me, that's one of the great joys and beauties of this place, is that you can come here and park at the Montero State Beach parking lot and walk down to that beach, and other than the money you spend on your gas and the beers and Cokes in the cooler, that day is free, and you can bring your family, and you can really enjoy. You can dig your feet in the sand, you can smell the air, you can hear the ocean, and you're not, you know, paying $10 to do it or whatever. It may seem like a trivial amount, but I want this to be a place where people can come and enjoy it and not have to worry about whether they're going to have to pay for parking and how much that parking is going to be and how much it's going to increase year on year and whatever. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Well, you want to do this as a member of the public, or?
Oh, no.
Okay,
I
I'm going to close public comment, and because I cut Dan off earlier, I'm going to give Dan first crack at his comments, and then you'll be next, Laura.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I just want to say quickly on the parking, you know, I do know quite a few Pacificans that are very upset with it, mainly because, well, principle, but the inconvenience, I understand that there's a certain contractor maintenance cost of having, so it keeps it, the lowest possible amount of money that you would be able to put in there and be legal with your parking is $3. Even if somebody wants to just get out and use the bathroom, you know, or a short walk on the beach. So if there was, I know it's somebody else mentioned, if it was a exceptionally low, enough to deter just leaving your car there all day, but also conveniently located, whatever they are, the kiosks where you go to, you know, you put your coins in and get your ticket. Two things to make it improve. Lower the price to be, you know, reasonable, even if it needs to be subsidized, and then convenient. The ones at the community center, if the front of the lot is full, you get a parking space the way in the back, you have to park all the way to get the spot, and then walk all the way to the front to Crespi to get your ticket, and then turn around and walk all the way back to put the ticket in your dashboard, and then go into the community center. So it's a little absurd. That on the parking, I wanted to ask, the fallow field, you know, yes, I do know quite a few people in Montero that are very concerned with that. Is there a way, I think it was mentioned, to have, you mentioned you have easements, whatever, in there. Is it, can we start out going in just to, you know, diagonal parking in the area and not venture in and create a big parking lot way in the back there? If you're talking about shared parking, nobody's going to want to park way back there and then turn around and walk to Montero Beach unless they live in Pacifica. They're used to that. That was a bad joke. And then, yeah, that's all I have.
Can I respond to that, or would you prefer wait?
By all means, please.
So that in particular, the fallow field, I should mention too that, so we've talked before in the past about doing a master plan for Rancho, and I think I've mentioned it to several of you on various occasions. I want to give you an update on sort of where we are on that status. So we are beginning a master plan process for all of Rancho, which will include trailheads, it will include new trails, it will include all the resource management, so natural, cultural resources. It will include the long-term operations and maintenance of the site. So it'll basically be a big, massive, comprehensive plan for what the future of that 4,000-acre site is going to be. As part of that process, it's going to be a very involved community process over the next 4 to 5 years. It's going to be very, very, a lengthy process. But it would also include the plan for the equestrian areas. But as part of that process, we'll figure out what do these sites look like. So say out of this study now we determined that yes, we are going to need to build some new parking somewhere. where is that going to be within Rancho? That's what that master plan process will do. It'll bring out all those nuances, the details of, do we want it further inland? Do we want it closer to the highway? Do we not want to build it there at all? So we're still looking at that as our preferred location, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's where it's going to be built. It's going to be through a community process to determine, does that make sense? We've also looked at, can we potentially do, Fair Longview School was one of our options. We talked to the school about it, and the problem is since they have various events on Saturdays, it's difficult to make that something consistent. But there are plenty of other options we can look at as being trailhead parking, as opposed to just one lot in the fallow field where it was shown in the Highway 1 mobility study. So that will all come out as part of the master plan process, so I encourage all of you to participate in that. But it will be a slow launch, that we're going to be starting with that in 2015, but it has to be done by 2019. And the reason for that is because the equestrian leases that are there currently, that are in place, will expire in 2020. So we have to have a plan in place to know what's happening after that by 2019. So from now to 2019, we'll have a plan in place that we want all of your participation for, and that's when we'll decide where we're going to put this future parking if we need it.
Thank you.
Okay. I think Neil sort of summed it up when he said that everything that's in this report is important to us. And so I would like to ask that well, first of all, thank you for doing it. Because no one else was stepping up to the plate, so that's fantastic. But I would like to ask if there's some way that the MCC can be provided with, I love data, as everyone knows, can be provided with the information that we can pour over, and then be able to provide some constructive information for you, and be involved in this process in some way before a final report comes out.
Sure.
That would be great.
I'll warn you, the spreadsheet is really, it's intense, but actually it's great that Dana's done a really nice job of compiling it all, and it's good to see there's a lot of numbers that go behind this. We just didn't present that here. These aren't just, okay, we pulled 400,000 out of the sky. There's a lot of detail behind this, so we're happy to share all of that if you want to look at it.
Okay, that would be great. And then if we could figure out, I'm speaking to the chair, I guess, if we might look at their timing and when we might make sure it's on an agenda that so we can comment in advance, you know the drill.
Yeah,
Okay.
we would definitely like to keep this on the agenda as you make progress, so. Not necessarily every time something changes, but when there's something of interest, we would definitely like to have it.
Sounds good. Okay, I wasn't through. Responding to Bill, because I think he made a good comment about Samtrans and something near and dear to my heart. I'm seeing in the same consultant studies for other, for I guess Connect the Coast side, these ideas about buses and shuttles, and the bottom line is we fought like crazy even just to take care of our current needs, and it's one of those chicken and the egg, and there's not enough ridership, blah 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 blah. Anyhow, so to see this in a report feels, disingenuous in some ways, and I don't mean just your report, I just mean in general to keep tossing Samtrans out there saying, oh, this is a possible solution to our problem. So if there's any way, I know that these are just sort of ideas right now, that we can sort of, I don't know, Nicholas, maybe you can help, where we sort of actually talk to Samtrans and find out, they have to have projections, I'm sure, for the future. If this is reality or we're sort of just fantasizing. And then lastly, this is sort of personal opinion. Low impact for any of this, and I say this because when we start talking parking lots and we start talking public agencies, the thing that drew us, as Neil talked about, that brought us here, the people and why people come here is because that's just what we don't want. We want this rural feel, if you will. And however, when you deal with either county departments or Caltrans or what have you, there's certain qualifications for everything, which aren't what we have here. And so even when we were talking about the congestion management plan and medians and what have you, one of the first things people said was, we don't want flashing lights. We do not want stripes. We don't want those things. Yeah, that change this ambiance here. So with that said, I'll stop talking now.
All right.
Well, the one
Lisa?
piece I can respond to, at least on the transit, I'm actually, it's good to hear the initial feedback that obviously the paid parking is a really controversial thing, and so I think that's clear that that's gonna move to sort of the absolute last resort, bottom of the list. It's just one of the tools that we could use, but it seems like that's not what people here want, and that's absolutely fine, and that's great to hear that that's the direction you'd like to go. There's things like transit, where I feel like if that's something you all support, this is where it's really great that you have all these partners working together on this, because now you have access to federal funds. So that's something that, there's a lot of funding available for providing alternative access to parklands. So something like the shuttle, where maybe Samtrans isn't able to provide something, that there are additional funding sources now that you're eligible for, just having National Park on the coast side here. So by working with the county and with state parks, with all of our partners here, that's where we can really leverage that sort of strength of a cohesive partnership. So I absolutely agree that transit, I think, is a really good opportunity or good suggestion to consider seriously here, because it will help minimize the amount of parking you need to provide, but it's something that won't have a significant impact then, and if there's funding available for it, then it's kind of a win-win, so.
Lisa, did you have any?
I'd like to minimize paving, and if we're gonna do, so if we're gonna have a parallel trail for trail connectivity next to the highway, that would be a good reason for paving, but not for parking lots so much. And I wonder why the shoulder parking along the highway at Montero State Beach needs to be all formalized with a turn in and paved and striped and everything, where it seemed to work just fine. And you were clear in your report that this is, the times when the parking is all filled up are really pretty rare. And for that gravel area to be used for parking on those rare times, it's like, so, it's not a big deal. And then the rest of the time, as you drive by and nobody's parking there, it's not this asphalt thing. And on the subject, I don't know if someone could look into, but in Montero, on the west side of the highway, between 5th and 7th Street, those 2 blocks have no parking signs. And this is an area where there is a generous shoulder. And this was, I don't know the dates, but the property owner at the location asked for these signs years ago with some story about how people came and fell off the cliff or whatever. They said it was dangerous, shouldn't allow people to park there, that they shouldn't even come there. And of course, we've been working really hard to get the fences taken down at the end of these streets so you can go look at the sunset or whatever it is. But anyway, this is really good shoulder parking. If somebody could so this is a Caltrans thing, I guess, they actually got permission to make that no parking. It seems to make no sense. There's a lot more room there than like at Surface Beach where people can park. But, yeah, I'm all for transit, trail connectivity, and as a last resort, maybe, some small parking lots if it's really needed, where you can't see it when you're driving along the road.
Yes.
So it doesn't, there was plans back in the 90s, I don't know what it was, and we put a big parking lot in at Montero Beach, and nobody wanted it, and it died. So, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I was thinking, and this has come up in the past with the comments about Great Whale Cove. It's fine, in my opinion, to pave the area near the highway, so you're not, getting gravel and sand and people skidding as they go in and out. But I'm a fan of keeping those gravel lots at Great Whale Cove, and if there's one at Fallow Field, make it like Tennessee Valley. Keep it gravel. The other comment I have, Laura pretty much preempted me, but flashing parking lot full signs. I go to Mill Valley all the time. I see the Muir Woods sign. I understand why it's there. I don't want to see that on the coast. I was one of the people who was very opposed to the flashing sign of the tunnel because my front window looked right out at it. I've moved since, but I do not like those kind of flashing signs, and I think that's pretty strongly felt on the coast. And I will also echo the no paid parking. I think in many ways it would be very difficult to get the Coastal Commission to agree to that. They even had decisions against the Iron Rangers up on the Sonoma Coast State Beach that had been free lots, and the state charged for it. So philosophically, I don't like paid parking. And I think it would probably be difficult to get it approved as well. Anybody else have any comments, questions?
One more thing. The perfect example, daily irritation for me, every time I drive by the day use lot next to the RV park at Surfers Beach, which they charge for parking there, and it's empty. And the people are parked on both sides of the highway. And it's
Yeah.
like, what's the
That's why it's
point?
important to recognize this is a regional strategy. So that's where we started too, that we thought we could build our own little thing here, but realizing that we're just gonna be shifting things elsewhere. So that's why we all started talking about, let's do this as a cohesive, shared regional parking strategy. And I think that's where we're heading, which is really great. I want to comment on your point too, that we recognize certainly this is a unique place. And I feel very fortunate that I get to work down here, that I'm representing San Mateo County for GGNRA. But we know that we need to be context sensitive to everything we're designing here. It's not what works at Muir Woods or what works in San Francisco doesn't work here necessarily. So we absolutely want to make sure that it remains what it is that you all as residents here want it to be.
Dave, I just wanted to echo that, you know, I agree, most of us do not want paved parking lots, and what Lisa mentioned, the gravel on the side of Ontario Beach area for parking, for overflow parking, that does work, and the fact that you just don't even kind of notice it during the week when it's not being used. So that's a very important key. Thank you.
When we say formalized parking, it doesn't necessarily automatically mean pave it and stripe it. It just means designating it as parking. So right now, it's kind of questionable, can you park on the side of Highway 1 or not? And it's clearly, when it says don't park here, you know not to, but there's a lot of areas like that, that if we just put up one little sign that says parking between here and here, and it's a safe enough distance away from where the travel lanes are, and it's a gravel shoulder, but at least people know that that's a formal parking area, that's what we mean by formalized, not necessarily pave it.
It's come up over and over that it is completely legal, and all visitors to the coast obviously know that because they all park there. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having
and
us.
we'll look forward to the updates. We'll have a very brief pause while you pack up, and then we'll move on to the big wave layer.
Thank you. Do you want to ask her for this information, or how do you want to?
And I want to just say
Dave,
again,
can I just make one announcement?
Sure. Nicholas is going to make one more announcement.
So if anyone has any completed surveys, I'll pick those up on my way out. And actually, I'm going to just make one more then. Actually, Lisa, I just want to thank you for everything you've done in this last year as the chair. I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to work with you. You've done a great job. The MCC overall has done such a phenomenal job this last year. It was very busy. Dave, looking forward to working with you. It's going to be another fun year, guys. So happy holidays to everyone, and stay dry. Everyone stay safe tomorrow. Storm's going to be pretty bad, so.
We'll call you if we,
You know how to get a hold of me.
I'll hear from, if I don't have mine done yet, what should we do with these works we sent?
Yeah.
If you don't have it done, you can mail it to me at the county center, probably. Yeah.
U.S. man.
Hey, Nicholas,
I know, right?
give me a call. I'd be happy to go down to the Pacifica with the Land's End trail.
You're on.
Okay?
Sounds good?
Yeah.
You're on.
Okay, folks, we are running late, so we're going to get on to our next agenda item, the Big Wave North Parcel Alternative, the 8-building option. We've received the referral from planning with the updates. They were minimal, and Lisa has done some work, so I'm going to turn this over to Lisa.
Well, just to clarify, what was minimal was the detail in what we received, not that the changes were minimal. But I don't, we've had this on our agenda a bunch of times, and this time I don't have a presentation. The letter's been posted since Sunday. I presume you've all read it, and that's it.
Okay, so does anybody on the council have questions or changes they want made in the letter?
Questions? No questions or changes. Comments when appropriate.
Okay, so if there's no changes, then we'll move on to comments. Chris, you're up.
Totally support the letter. Another good recap of the situation. I've got in my notes yet in response to the first paragraph. Plans we received are low resolution with limited detail and legibility, really revealing little more than building footprints. I wrote, yeah, it seems like just a concept drawing. That's really illustrated by, and just as, there's many things, but just as an example, the basketball court. As Lisa writes, or the letter states, it appears buildings 1 or 2 are actually joined by a covered basketball court. If you look at the thing, the actual words on it say, open to covered basketball court, which those words don't even make sense. And then furthermore, what is the height of the cover? What is the material of the cover? Is it transparent? What about the cover? What about this basketball court? This is just, and I don't, you know how I feel about Big Wave, but I'm not really blaming them per se on this. There's been a lot of movement on this thing, and this thing is just all swirled around, and now it's spit out up against the wall like this is the latest thing. Why the urgency here? There's just not enough detail. I would like to refer to the Surfers Beach Committee teleconference meeting, of which it was hoped that the Caltrans and the CCC would make a decision on which of the 2 options they liked. But what they said is they are not ready to make a statement on the preferred alternative yet because, quote, the plans that they have been given are lacking basic details needed to make a decision. And they don't have a clear picture of the full dimensions of parts of the project. So this is basic stuff that, and that's for a short-term thing that's gonna be there for 6 years or so. And we're talking about something that's gonna be there for the rest of our lifetimes. I don't like the sense of urgency. I don't think it's necessary. And when we get things that are just concepts for a project this big, I just don't understand how people can say, yeah, it's just concept. We got to push this thing. It's got to happen at the next meeting. I can guarantee you at the CDRC meeting next week, there's not going to be resolution on this project. And yet it's going to go to the Planning Commission in January and probably get approved. So, we got a 6-year project out here with the roads crumbling away and the CCC saying we don't have enough details, but Big Wave can give us something that has hand-drawn stuff on it, and we're good to go.
Okay, sorry, as a matter of process, I should have asked, does somebody want to make a motion to approve the letter as written?
I would like to make that motion to
Do we have a
approve
second?
letters.
Well, we need to have public comment.
I know, well, I'm not going to vote yet, I just want to get the
I want
motion
it on the
floor.
table. Oh.
I will
Yeah.
second that,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, great. So, Dan, do you have any comments you want to make?
Support the letter, that's it.
Are we, help me understand your process? You're gonna go to public comment, and then what happens next?
No, you can make any comments
Oh,
you
I
want.
can do this
It's just
now.
like Kristen.
Okay, I have been to every single design review meeting, and I want to preempt the arguments that somehow design review is trying to hold up this project. Absolutely not true. I believe the issue started when the county deemed the project complete. They had a set of plans, which was not in detail enough for design review, but they deemed the project complete. So then the plans, from the time the county approved them, morphed and changed into another set of plans, which design review was basically told, approve this, even though you were not really sure, and you're gonna be approving something that you're not sure is going to happen here. And design review said, no, we better go back to the drawing board. And that's what continues to bring every single time the project comes back to design review, it has changed in some fashion. This would not be allowed with a residential project. And the other part of the problem here is that I think the county doesn't frequently get projects of this size. And so therefore, the processes really aren't in place to handle something like this. They have not had a architect for something we're gonna have here for years and years with us. They have not had an architect to design this project from the start, okay? Everything from residential designers to then an engineer doing pieces and parts of it. It's not a cohesive plan. And so, just so everybody passes the word, this is not design review trying to stop the project. This is a design that's not ready to come to design review. So I think Lisa's laid out all the details here, and thank you, excellent letter. Must have taken some time, and yes, I support it.
Okay. Any comment you want to make for open to the public? Okay, does anybody wish to make public comment on the letter? Bill?
I actually want to thank the council for like dogging this because, I mean, Lisa's letter goes into it, but the rest of the council has been working hard on this too. The really bad thing about an ill-designed project, by ill-design, I mean, lacking specifics that, you know, you can actually later on go back and say, no, this is what we agreed to. Nobody knows what we're agreeing to. And like every project I ever worked on in my professional career, the less detail that was in it, the longer the project ran, the more it cost, and the more people that got really angry and upset about it. I mean, if you don't do your homework up front and, you know, draw the lines correctly and dot the i's and cross the t's, you just open yourself up for endless arguments, which means endless litigation, which means, you know, endless costs. So I don't understand why the county hasn't held, in fact, I don't even understand why the applicants are doing this, because it just, I mean, in the business, we used to call it, oh, throw the pasta on the wall and see what sticks. And that's sort of what's going on for a decade. So, again, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, council, for dogging this. I really do appreciate it.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Okay, closing public comment. We've got a motion on the floor to approve the letter as written. All in favor?
Aye.
Nobody opposed? It carries unanimously. All right. We're on to council activity. Correspondence received and meetings attended. Does anybody have anything they wish to report on? Chris?
Yes, the Surfers Beach meeting, Nicholas went into it a little bit. I wanted to, so the county was hoping, there's two alternatives, the riprap, the sheet pile wall. County was hoping that, you know, Nicholas phrased it as from the community meeting, the majority of people favored the riprap. You know, close enough. And so he didn't push, it wasn't pushed on CCC or Caltrans at the meeting, but it, you know, it wasn't, they were encouraged to, like, we gotta make a decision because there's a serious timeline here. And neither CCC or Caltrans felt that, like I already quoted, lacking basic details, needed to make the decision, don't have clear picture of full dimensions of either alternative, need better definition of the beginning and ending of this project. It's characterized as short term, but what does that mean? You know, short term in geologic time, or you know, human lifetime. So that was an issue that. You know, Grant Wilcox, he's the project lead for the consultant. He said that he would get that information, you know, as quickly. One of the things that troubled me a little bit is when Nicholas was trying to say, well, at this community meeting, you know, the majority of the people like the riprap, so, you know, the comment from CCC is, quote, the public is not the ones making the final decision. So, you know, maybe that just sounded a little harsh, but, you know, as a person there that was kind of representing the public, I kind of, you know, it rankled me a little bit of, like, well, okay, but we're the ones that got to live with it. One great idea that was presented here that, you know, I was like, oh, why didn't I think of that, is when we were talking about the stairway down and, you know, undercutting, somebody had the suggestion of, like, why are we angling it out perpendicular to the shoreline? Why don't we have a stairway that comes down in, like, a parallel fashion that maybe is not going to be so susceptible? It seemed like, wow, so great, and you know that. Yeah. So, let's see. Just to recap, the four major options that they're looking at are standard revetment, dynamic revetment, sheet pile wall, and nothing. So probably we're, you know, some kind of revetment or the sheet pile wall. That hasn't been decided yet. One thing that seemed to be troubling some of the people in the meeting, and again, there's like 15 people on this conference call, so it's kind of hard to keep track of who's talking, but just in any discussion of this, people get caught up in, like, well, okay, but when we put the riprap in or the sheet pile wall, then downstream there's going to be erosion, and you know, what are we going to do about that? And I totally agree with that, but then it comes back to this is an interim short-term project to just hold the roadway until the Army Corps of Engineers is done with their big study, and we've got the long-term solution, you know, the 50, 100-year solution. So if you've been out there, you know, the gravel path, the coastal gravel path, is now undercut. It's undercut. And I measured 42 inches from the edge of the roadway to the first piece of eroded dirt, the first feather of erosion. I mean, that's just not, you know, there's water. In this storm, there's going to be ocean waves on Highway 1. And we don't have much time, and so I agree. I don't want riprap there for 50 years, but we're going to be driving through Alhambra in 6 months if we don't do something on this, and the timeline is very tight. Then, but everybody understands the timeline, and I think people, there's still a collegial feeling of like we are all working together on this. They just needed, I think they just wanted a little more detail on the plans. The other meeting I attended was the.
Well, one question.
Oh, yeah.
How did it end? I mean,
How did
what's
it
like
end?
the next step?
Yeah, well, it ended with Grant kind of nicely saying, you know, we need the powers to be to decide on which way they want to go so that we can get started with the serious planning. So we're gonna have, you know, it wasn't, I don't know, I don't have a timeline for you on when the CCC and Caltrans will be satisfied with, but Grant said he would get them more
Oh, so
detailed
that's the
plans.
next thing, is they get
He's
the
getting them more
plans.
detailed plans, which I would hope they have right now, and they're looking at it, and we'll probably have a meeting at the beginning of January, and hopefully we'll have a decision on which one of these things so they can get started designing whichever one of the two options that we're looking at. Does anybody have any other questions on that meeting or project? The other, on the same day, I attended the San Mateo County Parks and Recreation Mini Parks meeting. This is to basically develop a policy that we can present to the Planning Commission, the Parks Department, to direct them on how to amend the San Mateo County Parks Strategic Plan, whether or not, well, question one, whether or not to incorporate or identify mini parks / neighborhood parks as something that they want to include. That right now, there's no designation or definition for mini parks in the San Mateo County Parks Plan, and this mini committee is asking and answering that question. The answer that we had was yes, we think that there is, and we're working on the definition, and then also under what conditions. And just, I don't want to go, but just a couple of conditions of like how would this work. Some ideas that were put out, and these are just ideas, is that each one of these mini parks must have a friends group associated with it. And the county would be the lead agency, and then there's a friends group that maybe are the boots on the ground, and the county is working directly with that friends group. As we had with Moss Beach Park, the reason that the county is seen as the lead agency here is because these friends groups, people come and go, they time out, their kids time out. The county has the continuity to keep this going over time, and if there's a friends group associated, now you've got that local input right there, and you know, they can form a board or something to help make decisions about that particular plan. Another idea was that each park must have a site plan, operating plan, as any of the larger regional parks would be, and the idea behind that is that there needs to be some consistency in overall management strategy and philosophy, and we don't want these mini parks being treated as second-class citizens because they don't have a site plan, and so they're just kind of, you know, oh, God, you know what, we haven't cleaned the trash cans at, you know, Moss Beach Park in 3 months now because we don't have an operation plan. So those are some of the ideas. Our next meeting is on January 15th, and we are hoping to provide a recommendation of policy to Parks and Recreation by February. Great. Yeah? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
Is the discussion on this being done entirely in the abstract except for Moss Beach Park, or are you using certain areas that might become a mini park here on the Midcoast?
Moss Beach Park, well, Moss Beach Park and Friendship Park are being presented in these meetings. Marlene Finley is leading the meetings. She's the director of parks for the county.
What is Friendship Park?
Friendship Park is in,
North Fair Oaks.
yeah, North Fair. In fact, this group has like 8 people on it. 4 of them are from Fair Oaks, and there's often the discussion gets very specific about the Fair Oaks situation.
But there's no other site here on the coast being talked about.
We haven't even got, like, acquisition is part of the policy. Like, what's going to be the policy for acquisition? For acquisition of existing properties, of acquisition of new properties, how are those going to be brought into the system?
Yeah, I wasn't concerned about that, but sometimes if you're talking about mini parks, it's at least good to have a case or two to think about.
Yes.
What's the real context to it.
So the Fair Oaks people are kind of holding the other side of the hill, you know, example up, and Neil and I are constantly referring to Moss Beach Park of like, okay, this happened here, this didn't happen here, you know, this is what we saw here. So we are using those Moss Beach Park for sure as kind of a set of examples for discussing this side of the coast. And it's definitely been identified that, you know, as with almost everything else, that side of the hill has a different set of issues than this side of the hill does. But how can we draft a policy that incorporates all of that, both sides?
Okay, thank you, Chris. Does anybody else?
Yes, I want to report that on December 3rd, I was at the San Mateo County Harbor District meeting, and the last act of this council, or the commission, was to, the last act of 2014 was to accept the offer for the sale of the post office lot to the Coastside Fire District. There were about 10 community members at the meeting speaking in favor of the Granada Community Services District acquiring it and having some type of an open town plaza, a major portion of the corner there, and then a good portion of the rest to be some level of community center. There were also 414 signatures on a petition that asked the Harbor District to only sell to the Granada Community Services District and for the Fire District to look somewhere else other than that lot. So it was sad for me, but that happened, and I'm not really sure what the next steps are. I guess it's a 90-day escrow, and well, we'll just have to wait and see what the final word, how it goes.
I do have a question, if anyone knows. I saw on GSD's agenda, it just came into my mind and I skimmed it, that there was something about litigation regarding this topic.
Oh.
Yeah, and does anybody, did Leonard leave already?
Yep, you'll have to ask
Oh,
Leonard
okay.
afterwards.
Okay, fine, go ahead.
Anything to report?
No, I have nothing to report. I wanted to hear about the seating.
Yeah, so I'll get to it. Lisa, anything? Okay, so I have 3 meetings to report on the Seton issue, and 2 of the meetings on the Half Moon Bay General Plan update, which will have some significant impact in various ways on the Midcoast. On Seton, they contacted us and offered to talk to us about the acquisition, what it looked like from their side, answer our questions. Chris was going to attend, but unfortunately conflicted with something else. So I met with Joanne Allison, the CEO, Joanne Allen, and sorry, I've forgotten the other person's name already, Ms. Ann, and she is the Chief Development Officer and the Community Officer. They expressed pretty much the public line. If you've seen the public position papers, you've probably seen most of what we discussed, but they went into some more detail. They are running out of money as of March 15th, 2015. They would be in the same position as the hospital in Richmond, which has been staggering along the last year. So they saw it as a fairly desperate thing to find a partner that they could sell to, that they felt would serve the community as far as they could enforce it. A big issue for them in particular was that Prime agreed to fund the pension plans, which are currently underfunded significantly. None of the other offers were willing to cover more than a very small portion of the pension plan. Prime also was willing to commit to supporting all the insurance plans that Seton currently supports, as well as the other hospitals in the system. There was some discussion about the union opposition. Their feeling, and I do not speak on either side of this, was that the union was primarily interested in being able to unionize the Southern California members of the system. The Northern California hospitals are already unionized. As far as maintaining the facilities, it is a 5-year requirement. Chris addressed this to some extent in his earlier discussion of all the existing facilities. As Supervisor Horsley has said in the past, you can't just abandon a hospital, although as we've seen in the case of Richmond, it's sort of hard to enforce if there's no money. So there has been a lot of comment in the press about Prime and some of the other potential buyers. From the Seton perspective, they see Prime as the only possibility. The next steps are to have the California Attorney General approve the offer and conditions and possibly change the conditions. I have a link which I've given to the council, and it will be in the minutes, I assume, that has all the documents that went to the State Attorney General, and any comments you have on those changes you want should go to the California State Attorney General. When something transitions like this from a nonprofit to for-profit, there's quite a few hurdles to jump through. But that is the current status from the perspective of the Daughters of Charity. It's a done deal. It's only depending on the State Attorney General to approve or amend. Any questions on that?
Just to reiterate that I do intend to bring this as an agenda item. I mean, Daughters of Charity, I'm glad you spoke with them. I really wish I had been able to be there. But they are on their way out. This is a done deal in their opinion. I want to get somebody from Prime in here and let's get their position on the table and in public, because as I said, they're, yes, they've agreed to do this, but as with any of these, corporate agreement documents, they've got a huge out there, financial, if it's not financially viable, then, we're not committed to operating here for the next 5 years. And like I said, I just, when I went and looked at those documents, they even had kind of a flow chart of, not a flow chart, like a chart of all the different facilities, old and then, Daughters of Charity and then Prime's reorganization. And again, it could be, the PR people say it's just a document, but Seton in Pacifica and Seton Coastside were now in the same box, whereas before they had been 2 boxes. So again, I just, this is a corporation, it's a for-profit corporation, the charter has been changed to business corporation status, with a total, out that you could drive a truck through, and the hospital, in their eyes, that's just 10 miles up the road. Why would we have 2 hospitals? So I just am really nervous about this.
The agenda item would be welcome. I can give you the contact information, and you can, I suspect they would arrange to have a representative from Prime here if we want one.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
When they contacted me, they seemed pretty clear. They didn't want to come here. They wanted us to go talk to them.
Yes, that was the
I'm not
informational
sure.
meeting, and so, we can't compel them to come, but we can invite them. We'll see what happens.
Do we know anything, do we have any influence in this
That's
at
my
all?
question, yes.
Because it
Okay, so
sounded like from your
the short
report
answer,
that
the
it's-
short answer is the county has an influence. For those who aren't aware of it, Daly City Seton is the county subsidized hospital for those who can't afford medical care for northern San Mateo County. And it was on that basis that the county agreed to help fund the seismic improvements for Seton Daly City. Not just out of the goodness of their heart, but because it was the hospital of choice that the county supports for those who can't afford medical care.
I would think that, we're advisory to the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Horsley is involved in this, and he has opinions on it, and he was here at some meeting we had and was talking about it, and as far as the future of Seton and the long-term care that they have there, as opposed to its value as an emergency room, in that it's not your full-on emergency room, and whether urgent care would be, I would think that rather than talk to Daughters of Charity or Prime, we would want to talk to Supervisor
Oh,
Horsley.
yes, we would definitely start with Supervisor Horsley.
Because they're not going to listen to us.
Yeah, I agree. We would definitely start with Supervisor Horsley.
I absolutely, but I definitely think it's important. Okay, Prime is stepping in as of January or February. Where are they? You know, where's their face in the community? And that's why I want somebody from Prime here at an MCC meeting to address the community and say, this is what hi community, this is what we're gonna do here. Because there's no, Prime is a faceless entity right now.
I agree. And we'll put that on the agenda when we get that set up. I'll work with you and Supervisor to get that on, if you wish.
Thank you.
So given that we're already running a half an hour late, I'm gonna try and race through the other two reports. And I will say, for those who don't know, the Half Moon Bay General Plan update has been going on for quite a while now. There was an attempt to do this a few years back. It didn't make it through. When this is more completed, it will also lead to an LCP and an LUP update for Half Moon Bay. The last LCP update for Half Moon Bay was in 1989, so it's woefully out of date. So there's a citizens committee. They've been meeting. The public has been there. I attended the one November 13th where there were 3 concepts presented and tried between them to incorporate a number of different ideas. None of them is like we're choosing A. It was just all the elements were scattered through these 3. The general plan advisory committee had issues with it. There wasn't enough open space in it for them. They didn't like either of the bypass roads, either the one to the west or to the east. So those were removed between that and the Planning Commission meeting, which was last night. So there was quite significant updates in the concepts between that meeting and the meeting last night. In the meeting last night, they presented quite a few things. They all point out that they allow for fewer growth, lower growth than the previous plan, although there was a lot of quibbling about some of the details of that. One thing that was not discussed very much but was very evident is that all 3 concepts had significantly increased retail and office space over the current general plan. And you'll sort of see that if you look at the maps. There's some significant commercial space in there. The next step is it goes to the City Council on the 20th for another study session. And then there will be more general plan committee meetings in the months afterwards. So pay attention to it. It will affect us significantly. Any questions on that?
Thanks for going and reporting on that, really.
The next city council meeting?
January 20th.
Okay.
I don't have any more details other on where, when, but I assume it'll be at 7 p.m. and probably at the Operations Center there or at ADCOG. All right. We're on to future agendas. As Lisa mentioned at the beginning, we have canceled the Christmas Eve meeting for obvious reasons. We are canceling the January 14th meeting because it would conflict with the Planning Commission on Big Wave. So we have a tentative meeting for January 12th, the Monday before our regularly scheduled meeting. As far as I know, we have no planned agenda items for that meeting.
Well, it would be to approve a letter on Big Wave.
Oh, that's right.
If we do get the additional plans.
Oh, well, no, if there's a Planning Commission meeting on the 14th, there will be a staff report coming out the Thursday prior. It'll be the same thing we went
Okay.
through with the Costanera and the
Okay.
previous Monday night meetings. It's the rush job commenting on the staff report.
All right.
So that would be the item, and I would tend, so the last time we did the 2 Monday special meetings, we had just the single item to approve the letter, we had no TV, but perhaps since we're not having any more meetings between now and who knows when, maybe this should be a full meeting with whatever else we need to talk about and have it covered by the TV and all.
Right. So does anybody have any agenda items they know of at this point? Chris, obviously, potentially there would be the Seton issue, although that would be pretty quick.
Yeah, I don't know if I can get that all wrangled together in time, but I do need to focus my attention on that.
Okay.
I think it's probably useful, even if there's not another big item, to just be able to cover all the stuff we're doing, so we don't get too behind.
Oh, yes, I think we should have a regular meeting for that reason.
I don't know where this fits in, but that's what we call a retreat, or whatever you want to call it, to look at signing tests and what our goals are for the year and that sort of thing. So we generally have that in January as well. I don't know if.
That's right, that was at
this
the end
covered
of
that with you.
end of January this
Last
year.
year we had, I think, on February 1st.
Oh, did we? We went into February?
Well, February 1st.
That's the end of January.
I'm getting a little too convulsed.
Okay, does the council
We
feel?
usually try to schedule that in conjunction with Supervisor Horsley.
Right. Yeah, we will have to definitely get Supervisor Horsley's availability or interest.
We're allowed to talk about agenda dates and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, so we don't
Yeah.
have to decide that.
All right, so if nobody else has any other known agenda items, we'll leave it as suggested.
I want to just, I wasn't sure how this ended, and I can maybe talk about this at another time. But this, our involvement in this, you know I've got my hooks in that.
We may have the material we need and be ready to comment on it by that date.
Okay, fine.
Didn't
Yeah.
she say she would get us stuff by the end of the month?
By the end of the month,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
Okay,
tentatively we
I'm
can.
calm now.
Okay, well, why don't we tentatively put that on the agenda for the 12th as well as Fresh Big Wave.
Parking study.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
We couldn't hear what you were putting on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. We were speaking about the report which Christine sent the draft version of, she referred to in her presentation. It's on the MCC website.
Well, no, it isn't.
Oh, it was not on the website,
No,
sorry.
we only got a memo for tonight's presentation, which is posted. She said she would get us more material by the end of this month. So what we just said was tentatively for our special meeting on January 12th, that would be potentially another agenda item if we wanted to comment on that
Are
material.
there two parts there? One is the report and the other is the actual data in the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Whatever.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, that's my question.
Right, she definitely indicated she would get the report to us, and I assume from her comments, we'll also get the data.
So you'll just post those on the site as soon as they come to you?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Don't you
All
hold
right.
back.
Does anybody wish to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Dave. Oh, and I
And
have to
thank
turn
you,
over.
Lisa.
Oh, well.
Thank you, Lisa.